Chapter 110. Before they could react, Thea swung her sword with her right hand and pointed it at the sky. For the glory of the Alliance. No, the words quickly changed to, for the freedom of Gotham. When the first gunshot rang out on the battlefield, she had already found cover and rested in a corner. It couldn't be helped. After fighting for half an hour, Talia wasn't easy to deal with. Not only was she exhausted, but she was also injured. She looked at her wounds. They were all superficial wounds. Her clothes looked good, but they had almost zero defense. Next time, she would have to get a set of high-density Kevlar from Batman. She ignored the battle in front of her, jumped over the crowd, and went to the back to rehydrate and bandage her wounds. What? Sisters fighting over a husband? She had just taken 2 sips of water when she was shocked by the news that Felicity whispered to her. What kind of logic was this? What happened to not spreading rumors? There were more than 500 people here, and that was enough to sentence her. When she found out that the final version of the story had been spread among the people on the battlefield, she did not know what expression to make. You Gotham people have too much time on your hands. That's why your imagination is so wild. She squinted her eyes and looked at the battlefield. Her first thought was to silence them. Did she have any weapons that could kill all of them? That would be difficult. Half of her pride from trapping Bane disappeared. She had taken the bullet and taken the blame at the same time. Batman, Catwoman, why don't you guys explain yourselves? She was depressed and could not be bothered to fight. From afar, she watched Catwoman take on the pig-faced man, and Barbara and Robin take on the 2 Talons with their swords. Catwoman was not sure if she was depressed or relaxed. She was supposed to be the female lead, but now she had no scenes left. She was depressed. Her stick was aimed at the pig-faced man's head. The enemy's head was already larger than a normal person's, but now it looked even bigger. Was she planning to beat him until he became an idiot? Barbara and her husband worked well together. The 2 Talons were top killers trained by the Owl Court since they were young. They were not weak either. It was hard to tell who would win in a 2 versus 2 situation. Thea, I know you need to recover your strength, but you won't be able to trap Bane for long. Bruce, who was monitoring the situation from afar, was very concerned about the enemy who had broken his back. Oh! Thea nodded in understanding. Her eyelids drooped as she looked at the large cocoon in the distance. Bruce was right. At first, Bane was not really trapped in the web. He had fainted because he had absorbed too much of the chemical substance from the spider silk. Now, with his amazing resistance to poison, he had gradually regained consciousness and was struggling with all his might. Counting the arrows on his body, he originally had 5 frost arrows. Killer Crocodile used 2, and the Penguin just now wasted 1. It seemed that he would have to use another one today. The distance was a little far, so he could only use projectile. Fortunately, the power of the frost arrow was not reflected in the arrow. It did not matter if it hit the target or not, as long as it was within range. He pointed his bow at the sky and shot another frost arrow in Bane's direction. This time, there was no big head and thick neck to disturb the situation. The effect of the frost arrow was good. In just 10 seconds, Bane, who was about to break free, was frozen solid again. You have the ability to freeze too? Miss Firefly, who also did not fight in the front, looked at Thea with a strange tone. What's the meaning of your eagerness to try? You have such a big opinion of the Frost team. If you see the Frost team in the future, what kind of expression will you make? Of course, Thea could not say that Miss Firefly's condition was too serious. Medicine could not suppress it, so she had to prepare for physical therapy next time. She said embarrassedly, "It's not my ability, it's the power of the arrowhead. And there's only 1 arrowhead left." That's a good move. Is it liquid nitrogen or liquid ammonia? In the distance, Batman saw her arrowhead for the first time. The cobweb arrow just now was already very impressive, but now the effect was even better. Knowing that she could not hide it, Thea and Bruce chatted for a while. The 2 did not talk about the core technology, and only discussed the theory. I say, stop chatting. Help us out first. Barbara Robin was a little tired facing 2 well-trained claws. Listening to them talk about all kinds of messy elements, she was getting more and more annoyed. Okay, I'm coming. Thea was not so easy to talk to because she wanted to flatter Barbara. After all, she first came to Gotham to rob the rich. Now, who in Gotham was richer than the Court of Owls? The accumulation of dozens of families for more than 200 years, however, this matter could not be done in public. It required some secret methods. She took out a special arrowhead. This arrowhead was installed with a nanoscale tracker. It was stolen from Ray Palmer's company by one of Old Ma's men. Old Ma thought it was useless and gave it to Thea. Even Felicity did not know about the arrowhead's creation. The Court of Owls was rich, but they hid it well. In order to find this group of fat sheep, Thea decided to use the tracker on the two claws. She aimed at one of the claws that was less agile. Robin's baton hit him, and he could only dodge to the side and look for an opportunity to counterattack. Thea kept moving in the crowd and saw this flaw. Without hesitation, she pulled out an arrow and shot. Her archery skills were not as good against Bane and Talia because one of them was strong and the other was agile. However, it was just right to deal with these people whose strength was between second tier and first tier. The arrow hit him squarely in the stomach. Ouch! Even though the claws were brainwashed and did not have any sense of right or wrong, they could still feel pain. Knowing that he was ambushed, he waved the sword in his hand like a windmill and forced Robin to back off. He gritted his teeth and pulled out the arrow from his stomach. He looked around for the person who ambushed him. At this time, Thea retreated back into the crowd. She turned on the switch on her glasses and confirmed that the nanoscale tracker had entered his body and attached to his organs. She nodded with satisfaction and turned off the tracker. Now was not the time. Sia, our spies have reported that the major crime families in the city are gathering their forces and rushing towards us. Lara, who had always been quiet, reported the bad news at this time. How far are we? Less than 2 blocks. Was this premeditated, or did the Court of Owls do this on the spur of the moment? Thea felt that it was the latter. Talia's departure had dealt a heavy blow to the balance of power between the two sides. This was probably something they did not expect. If they were attacked from the front and the back, they would definitely lose. Thea observed the strength of the people in the battlefield. Selena, come back quickly. Catwoman heard the order and quickly sent the pig-faced man away. What's the matter? Thea handed her an arrow. You've seen it before. It's my magnetic arrow. I need you to insert it behind the enemy. It's best if you can cover the enemy within a range of 50 meters. Chapter 111. Sir, order your men to wait for the signal. Once the enemy is out of weapons, we will charge in and take them out. The field was too big for Thea to shoot that far, so she could only ask the parkour expert Catwoman to do the job. Thea, the thermal imaging shows that the enhanced man is coming out. Felicity, who had been staring at the monitor, also brought bad news. Robin, go prepare the wavelength transmitter. Thea fired a barrage of arrows to force Talon back. She then covered Barbara and herself as they retreated back to the main force. Regardless of whether they retreated or counterattacked, it was always a good idea to regroup. Catwoman, who was as agile as a human could be, ran from high to low. She weaved through the crowd and buildings. She had an excellent sense of direction, and after a few turns, she arrived at the back of the main force. She then used the dart technique to insert the arrows into the ground behind the battlefield. It's done, Catwoman said to Thea behind her. Find a place with thick walls and hide. Thea estimated the time and pressed the switch on the bow. Just like yesterday, a low humming sound was heard. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Many of the Arkham bandits were shaken by the loud noise, and they didn't even notice that their weapons were gone. Attack! Director Gordon couldn't wait to blow the bugle and raise the Star-Spangled Banner high. The old man took the lead and rushed up with his pistol. His men saw how reckless the director was and how the enemy had lost their weapons. What was there to be afraid of? They charged forward like they were on steroids. The ratio of casualties on the battlefield instantly increased. The unarmed bandits faced the armed police. It was like the Native Americans facing the colonists. Even though their hearts were filled with hatred, they still fell to the ground unwillingly. Although Chief Gordon couldn't bear it, he knew that the enemy's reinforcements were coming. Having been on the battlefield, he knew his priorities and didn't mention anything about the Miranda Clause at all. His subordinates were also in a killing frenzy and had long forgotten that they were police officers and not soldiers. In later history, this day would be known as the Gotham Massacre. Countless humanitarian defenders sat in air-conditioned rooms and expressed their dissatisfaction with the massacre caused by the Gotham Police Department. Of course, this was a story for later. At this moment, not knowing that they were in the middle of a historical event, The police officers were rather restrained, but the hot-blooded citizens and veterans were overjoyed. They could no longer control the violence in their hearts, and they held their submachine guns and fired at the empty-handed criminals. In less than a minute, the dark ground of Arkham Square was dyed red by the blood of sin. Both the elite scarecrows and the loyal penguins fell to the ground in droves. To be honest, Batman didn't feel good when he saw this scene, but he also knew that he couldn't stop it. This was war. Either the good guys would be sacrificed, or the bad guys would be wiped out. It was impossible to knock everyone out and take them away. Thea and Gordon's decision wasn't wrong. Thea, on the other hand, didn't feel guilty. These were all bad guys, so if you locked them up, they wouldn't do anything bad? She noticed that some of the veterans were losing control, so she walked over to Lara and whispered, "The enhancers are about to attack from the west. You should lead them there and hold off the first wave of attacks." Both of them knew who she was referring to. The mastermind behind the scenes started to panic. Seeing that his men were being slaughtered like never before, the enhancers that he controlled did not leave through the door. Instead, he used explosives to open up a path, and over 200 enhancers charged out. The ones facing the strong enemy were the veterans. They were purposely led to the side by Lara's agents in disguise, and they were just in time to face the strongest wave of attacks since the beginning of the war. Thea didn't immediately order for the sonic weapons to be used. Instead, she watched coldly. On one hand, she wanted to reduce the number of uncontrollable factors, and on the other hand, she wanted the enhancers to enter the attack range. As the veterans continued to die, until there were no more enhancers coming out of the asylum, she nodded to Robin. This time, the sound wave was different from Sia's magnetic arrow. Her magnetic arrow was purely collateral damage. Master Bat's infrasound was the real deal. Before anyone on the battlefield could notice anything, the 200-plus enhancers had already started to stagger. The effect is not bad. Thea gestured to Director Gordon. Let's continue. Can these people still be saved? The old director was still trying to salvage the situation, but Thea shook her head. The genetic transformation is irreversible. They are no longer the original citizens, Director. The old director, who was known as the Executioner Gordon in the years to come, had nothing to lose. What difference did it make if they killed 300 or 500 people? With a wave of his hand, everyone started to focus fire on the new targets. It had to be said that the effects of the biochemical experiment were obvious. These people were much stronger than the dead bandits on the ground. Many of them could still run forward after being shot 4 or 5 times. But as more and more people fell to the ground, the remaining few with thick skin had to face the barrage of 5 or 6 guns at the same time. They were bleeding profusely, and the sonic weapons were still emitting infrasound waves, which increased the casualties of the enhancers. Bang! An earth-shattering sound pulled Thea's gaze to the east. Bane, who was frozen by her, had made countless cracks in the ice. Half of his strong arm was already stretched out. The loud sound was the result of his all-out attack. This was the first time Thea saw someone who could defrost himself. Although this method was a little violent, this guy's strength was indeed beyond scientific calculation. This was too exaggerated. Did she have any other way? Thea, get out of the way. He has lost his mind. Batman knew this enemy well and quickly reminded them. Yes, breaking the ice from the inside. How strong was that? At this time, Bane's eyes were bloodshot. He broke the ice on his body with a few punches and kicks. The muscles on his upper body were bulging like a small mountain. The venom on his back had decreased by 1/5, and there was still a lot of it being delivered to his lips from the can. This guy had gone berserk because of her. Thea thought this was the most reasonable explanation. Whoever went up now would die. The military helicopters that were originally prepared to deal with the crime families had no choice but to participate in the battle ahead of time. She turned to Lara and said, "Shoot him with your helicopter cannons and see if you can lure him away. If he leaves the crowd, use the missiles." She raised her hand and made a cutting motion. What about Batman's fated battle? She really didn't think that much. Besides, looking at this berserk guy, Master Bruce should just go to sleep. You can't beat him, so I'll help you take care of him first. The military helicopters were very fast. They quickly drove over from their previous hiding spot and rained bullets on the big fool on the ground who was emitting green gas. At this time, Bane could be considered as Super Bane. After the brain was stimulated by the venom, his body's potential was fully activated. He was immune to the bullets to a certain extent. He grabbed the things around him and threw them into the air. When the military helicopters saw that they had successfully lured Bane, they began to shoot a few times and flew a distance away, trying to lure Bane away. Chapter 112. Actually, it would be best to drag Bane along with the criminal families and let them fight each other. However, no one was stupid. These families with deep roots had ground-to-air missiles, and the pilots did not dare to get close. The American military was too lazy due to the liberal democratic ideology preached by their politicians. It was very ironic. They were willing to fight battles that were favorable to them. As long as there was a little danger, they would immediately revolt. It was not uncommon for soldiers to fight against generals. Thea could not guarantee that her orders across the Eight Paths Bay would be carried out without any reservations. Just as she was about to retreat, Barbara ran over with a red face. "Why are we retreating?" Yes, it was hard to say how many people they had today. A conservative estimate was that they had killed at least 1/3 of Gotham's criminals, and it was a permanent elimination. With so many people, it would take at least 2 years to capture them according to Batman's habits. At this time, Barbara was holding a person in her hand. "Look who I caught. Scarecrow." Haha. At this time, the former Gotham professor had already fainted. There was a bloody hole in his left shoulder that was bleeding. Seeing that he was not missing an arm or a leg, Thea was a little disappointed. It was not appropriate to kill him after catching him. As for Barbara's question, seeing how happy she was, Thea did not want to dampen her enthusiasm. She could only say softly, "We don't have much ammo left." Barbara's face instantly turned pale. Without ammo, wouldn't they be the same as those people who were slaughtered just now? She turned to look at her father. After receiving confirmation, she quickly asked Thea, who had leveled up into a resourceful star. "What should we do?" "Don't worry, this place is so big. I've already asked Catwoman to scout ahead. She knows the place well. We'll be back after taking a big detour." Thea knew that the attack on Arkham under her command had come to an end. The next time they came, it would be Batman leading the team. She could not help but sigh. Looking at the Scarecrow being carried away, she asked them about the results of the battle. She found out that the Talon duo had already escaped, the Penguin Man was missing, and the Pig-Face Man was killed on the spot because he was too big. Talon's escape was good news for him. Even if Penguin Man was still alive, Talia would come after him. Although he didn't manage to destroy Arkham in the end, the enemy's strength was basically wiped out. At least his efforts were not in vain. He ordered the troops to follow the Catwoman, who had returned from exploring, and went around 7th Avenue and Poplar Street to return to the camp. Before she left, Thea ordered Miss Firefly, who had maxed out her fire talent, to set up a fire. On one hand, she wanted to stop the enemy from chasing after her, and on the other hand, she wanted to burn down this evil asylum. The retreat was quite successful. The major crime families were only motivated by the interests of the Owl Court and didn't want to fight them head-on. Both sides tacitly returned to their homes. Once they returned to the camp, everything was fine. At least Thea had nothing to do. She was not in a hurry to activate the tracking device. The Court of Owls was not at the end of their rope yet. She needed to wait a little longer. During dinner, the few of them gathered together to discuss the next step of the plan. This time, Thea had gradually reduced her speech and left all the work to Batman. The two of them were well aware of this exchange of roles. At this time, a police officer walked up to Gordon and whispered a few words in his ear. "I'll take care of it. I'll be back in a bit." The old director walked out after hearing the words. But before he could walk out the door, a sharp voice shouted from outside the door. "Jim, old friend, you must help me." "Arrest me. Hurry up and arrest me." The person seemed to be held back by a few people, but he was still shouting at the top of his lungs. Was he in a hurry to surrender? This was a rare occurrence, but it was obvious that the only person who could be considered an old friend of Gordon's was the unlucky Penguin Man. He didn't expect this guy to be so tenacious and strong-willed. After all, even a strong man like Bane, who was almost driven crazy by Thea's frost arrow, this guy was still alive and kicking as he chased after them. It was amazing. "Take him to the surveillance room for questioning." Bruce, who had already taken over as the leader, said to the old director. He couldn't let him barge in. The few people in the room weren't wearing their masks. Robin and the others weren't important, but Thea and Bruce were famous people. Their identities couldn't be leaked out. The few of them lost their appetite for dinner and went to see the former underground emperor of Gotham. The penguin man in the surveillance room could only be described as miserable. His hair was disheveled and he looked like a ghost. His originally lame leg was now completely necrotic. He had to be supported by his loyal subordinates all the way here. He probably knew that the few of them were looking at him in front of the surveillance camera. He cried and complained to the camera about his various evil deeds, which meant that they had to arrest him immediately. What do we do with this guy? Gordon, the boss of the police station, asked. This guy was obviously afraid of death. He used the excuse of surrendering, but in reality, he was here to avoid trouble. Anyone with an above-average IQ could understand this, but he couldn't throw him out because of his identity. At the same time, he subconsciously looked at Thea to ask for her opinion. He really didn't understand how the Alliance should take revenge. Looking at the high-end ceremony, would it cause a chain reaction if he said that he was going to take him into custody? Was it necessary for him to sacrifice countless police officers for a major criminal? It was a bit of an exaggeration to say that Thea was buried in the hole she dug, but at least half of it was buried. She couldn't say that she was acting during the day. Her relationship with the Alliance couldn't be exposed, so she had to keep it a secret. She thought about it again and again. She couldn't say anything, so she could only push the blame to someone else. Let Uncle Bruce decide. She turned and left the surveillance room after saying that. At this time, Uncle Bat was in a dilemma. With his IQ, he could see that Thea didn't care. Only Talia could scare Penguin like this. But this was the contradiction. He didn't want to see Talia at all, but he also didn't want to let the criminal go. He wanted to go back to bed and pretend to be sick for a few more days, so that he could push the blame to Thea, but Thea had already run away. After weighing the pros and cons, he finally won out. Lock him up. Humph. Catwoman knew a little about his psychological activities. She thought that he still wanted to see his old lover. She was jealous, slammed the door and walked out. Batman felt that he wasn't understood, so he went outside to get some fresh air. Unexpectedly, he saw Thea, who he suspected to be his sister-in-law, sitting on a tree and looking into the distance. It was a rare opportunity, and he also wanted to talk to this smart and witty girl to confirm her true thoughts. But he couldn't climb trees now. His waist hadn't fully recovered. He walked to the tree and asked softly, "What are you thinking about?" Thea jumped down the tree. "I'm thinking about my father and brother." She wasn't lying. She didn't know if she had ruined Oliver's opportunity, but she really didn't care. She just wanted to take him back to Star City and reunite with her family. As for Green Arrow and Talia, they could go to hell. Chapter 113. Batman, who was well-versed in psychology and had done a lot of research on micro-expressions, immediately knew that she was telling the truth. He felt a little sad as they were in the same boat. His parents had both died, and she had lost her father and brother. Their fates were really similar. But he still wanted to ask himself a question. So many people died during the day. Do you feel guilty? They were all bad guys, and they were killed by the police. We are a country with a legal system, and these people deserve to die for resisting. Thea sometimes could not understand the logic of these heroes, but she could not refute them. She changed her perspective and pushed all the blame to the police. Anyway, I didn't do it, I'm very calm. Batman was also stunned by her sophistry. What she said was completely correct, and no one could find fault with it. But he still did not want to give up. But we just killed all the criminals. Isn't that inappropriate? Thea knew that he would not give up until he got an answer. She could only use the enthusiasm she had when she debated with Old Ma last year, and come up with another theory. You are enforcing the law by arresting the criminals and sending them to the police station, and they are also enforcing the law by resisting until they are killed. This is not contradictory. Today's action is not a small-scale arrest. We are fighting a war between good and evil. There can only be one winner, and this war is not over yet. There are still thousands of citizens waiting to be rescued. Thea did not give him a chance to reply. She continued, I admire your actions, but from what I have seen in Gotham recently, Gotham not only lacks a Batman, it also lacks a Bruce. What do you mean? Batman was confused by her words. It means what it means. You are Batman at night and a playboy during the day. I think it is a bit of a waste of Bruce's illustrious identity. You should know that Chief Gordon is about to retire. So who will be in charge of Gotham during the day? Have you thought about it? You mean? Bruce's IQ was off the charts. He instantly understood what she meant, but he was still not sure. Strive to take over the position of police chief after Chief Gordon retires. With your connections and wealth, you can do better than the old chief. Thea didn't have a deep relationship with him. She was just trying to divert his attention to the politicians and financial groups. It would be much easier for her to deal with the Owl Court. But Batman really listened to her nonsense, and he even carefully considered the deeper meaning of her words. Gordon had been a police officer when he was young, and the two had worked together for many years. Today, Thea's words made him realize that his old buddy was really old. It's not wrong to say that it's dark under the light. I really haven't thought about the future of the police station. The old chief should really take a break. After so many years of life and death, he was kidnapped by bad people countless times. If it were me, there wouldn't be such a problem. Would I be afraid of being kidnapped? He nodded at Thea, indicating that he would think about it, and left with a lot on his mind. After he left, Thea found a clean patch of grass and sat down. She said softly as if to herself, "He's gone far. Big sister, come out." Talia's figure appeared from behind a tree trunk not far away. She didn't have a bow, only a long sword at her waist. "You're not my sister." Wasn't that obvious? Thea wasn't wearing a hood or glasses. Anyone could see that she wasn't related to Talia by blood. "It's obvious." Thea picked up a pebble on the ground and threw it into the distance. Talia didn't have the intention to fight. She found an empty spot and sat down. The two were about 3 meters apart. She looked at her with bright eyes. "Where did you learn your martial arts?" Thea smiled but didn't say anything. How could she expose herself so easily? "Are you trying to bully me because I'm young?" Talia was mentally prepared for her silence. She started to analyze. "You're definitely not trained in Nandabart. You're the descendant of a certain adjutant, right?" It couldn't be helped. The ninja master had lived for too long. There were more than 100 adjutants who worked with him. Although most of them died in Nandabart, there were always a few exceptions. Talia couldn't be sure if these people's descendants passed it down. "You don't want to attract the ninja master's attention to Gotham, right?" Since they couldn't see the light of day, things were easier. Yes. The two of them could reach a consensus on this point. Sia nodded. "According to the rules of the Alliance, I'll leave and not participate in the matters here. Since you're not too bad, I'll remind you that the Owl Court has found a secret weapon and is currently activating it." This news surprised Thea. The court had a lot of cards up their sleeves. How could they have a secret weapon to turn the tables at this point? "What is it?" she asked anxiously. Talia smiled proudly. "I don't know. I only heard that they stopped the experiment of strengthening humans. That Professor Hugo is trying his best to solve it." Seeing that Thea was deep in thought, she threw a metal plate to her. "I owe you a favor this time. If you need anything, you can find me in Russia." After that, she walked quickly into the forest and disappeared in a few sprints. Sia was dismayed by this half-spoken approach. It was too difficult to build trust between people. What kind of weapon was this? She racked her brains but could not think of any other weapon that Gutan could have up his sleeves. She could only shout to her right. "Did you hear what she said? What weapon do you think it is?" "I'm dumbfounded. How would I know?" Catwoman walked to Thea's side and lay on the ground. She was still chewing on a piece of grass as she stared blankly at the fading sunset. "Your family of 3 only wanted me, an outsider, to be your counselor, right? Come on, let's continue chatting." "She's gone anyway. Isn't that good? You can have some alone time with Bruce again. Don't go to Star City for this date. Go to the metropolis." Thea remembered their unique way of traveling clearly. "No, I don't have money." Speaking of this topic, the feline girl felt depressed, and even Sia, who was half a teacher to Lady Shiva, felt awkward. Big Sister was too ruthless. Just look at how she forced the feline girl into such a state just so that her daughter could live a carefree life. Seeing that she still wanted to say something, Catwoman interrupted her and took out a scroll from her bag. "This is a painting I got from Killer Moth. Take a look and I'll sell it to you." Painting? Thea felt that her ancestors didn't have any artistic cells. It was better to talk about explosives and swords with her. Why talk about painting? Besides, she was poor. If you didn't talk about money, they could still be friends. However, it wasn't appropriate to reject it directly. She could only accept it and take a look. The painting wasn't long. It was less than a meter in length and width. It was obvious that the painting was very old and had been repaired by an expert. However, Catwoman violently cut it, so its value was reduced by at least 50%. The content of the painting was also very monotonous. It seemed to be a forest with a winding stone path in the forest. Other than that, there was nothing else. There were no people or animals. It could barely be considered a landscape painting. Chapter 114. It was supposed to be a very ordinary painting, but it was this ordinary painting that made Sia feel that her strong willpower was constantly being absorbed. At the same time, whispers came from the painting, the sky, and the trees. It would have been better if she could hear them clearly, but the voices were so soft that it seemed like a gust of wind could blow them away. No matter how hard she tried, she could not hear a single word. "Hey, what's wrong with you?" The feline girl was still waiting for her to reply, but after waiting for a long time and seeing that she didn't respond, she gave her a light push. "Me." Sia didn't know what was wrong with her. She carefully looked at the scroll again. The great suction force had disappeared, but she could still hear the whispers in the air. She didn't know if it was because of her tinnitus or something else, but she could still hear the whispers in the air. There was definitely something wrong with this painting, but was it only affecting her or everyone else? Sia had to ask the cat girl to see if she had any abnormalities. "What era do you think this painting is from?" "The software shows." Catwoman almost gave Felicity away, but she quickly corrected herself. "I think it's an antique that's more than 1,000 years old." Thea was not in the mood to pay attention to her slip of the tongue. She wanted to confirm one last time. She opened the painting and asked Catwoman, "Which master do you think left this painting behind?" Catwoman had actually looked at the painting several times. If she could figure out its origin, she would have sold it for money. She glanced at it casually. "I don't know." Thea had been watching Catwoman's subtle facial expressions from the corner of her eyes, but nothing happened. Catwoman was still lying there lazily, in stark contrast to her previous absent-mindedness. "This painting is destined to be with me?" That thought popped up in her mind. "Then there's nothing to say. I'll buy it myself." Catwoman was a little embarrassed when she asked for the price. It was against her principles to sell such a worn-out and obviously stolen painting to her friend. But she was really in a tight spot now. A hero was a hero after all, so she did not have any psychological burden. Thea was poor, but a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. No matter how poor she was still a billionaire. The two of them completed the transaction happily. Catwoman, who felt that she had taken advantage of a fat sheep, was afraid that she would regret it and run away. Thea did not feel that she had been cheated. If there was nothing wrong with the painting, she would not have taken it. She secretly laughed at Catwoman's blindness. She would be poor all her life. Back at the campsite, they met to discuss the superweapon that Talia mentioned. Batman played dumb and did not ask her where she got the news from. Gordon and the others did not think to think so. As they discussed, they were all a little confused. As locals, they had no idea that there were any powerful weapons in their city. The old director also interrogated Penguin Man and Scarecrow, but to no avail. The spies under Lara's control did not give out any important information either. They only heard that Bane had finally regained his consciousness after 2 days. Now, he was hiding in Arkham to recuperate from his injuries. The remaining major crime families were fighting over the territories of Penguin Man and Scarecrow, who had survived the butcher's knife. The families fought, and the Owl Court did not stop them. In short, other than the illusory powerful weapon, the rest was good news. Thea got rid of her red leather jacket and changed into the high-density Kevlar combat suit that Batman provided. Wayne Group had been in the field of biopharmaceuticals for many years. They were at the top of the world when it came to micromolecular composite materials. Of course, to maintain the consistency of her personal style, the combat suit was still mainly red. This combat suit was extremely tough. It was immune to handgun bullets at close range, and bullets from rifles within 100 meters could also be stopped at the fabric layer. However, Thea politely declined the cape that Batman had given her along with the clothes. What was the use of the cape other than looking good? How many times had the red cape of a Supergirl been grabbed by the enemy and beaten to the ground? Why didn't they learn from such a painful lesson? However, seeing that the material of the cape was very particular, Thea did not refuse. Under Batman's regretful gaze, she handed it to Felicity as a souvenir. Her trip to Gotham was not in vain. Batman had been adjusting his body's condition for the past few days. His recovery ability was really strong. Injuries that took at least 100 days for an ordinary person were healed in less than a month for him. As the strongest fighter in the camp, Sia had to take some time to do some physical recovery training with him, even though she had taken someone else's battlesuit. Batman had not recovered to his peak, but he was able to fight Thea to a standstill. One of their punches was heavy and the other was light. They were evenly matched. Right now, Sia's fighting ability was approaching perfection as the number of battles increased. She was about to form her own style, and it was only a matter of time before she would appear on Prometheus's list of 30 pugilists. When Barbara asked about Wing Chun, both of them said that they knew how to do it. It wasn't some secret that couldn't be passed on. However, Batman looked weird when he practiced, so Thea could only act as a temporary teacher. Speaking of which, it was strange. Ever since Sia was no longer the commander, Barbara, who had always been critical of her, actually took the initiative to ask her out for a walk twice. The relationship between the two was no longer as stiff as before. For the rest of the time, Sia had been making all kinds of arrowheads. It would be a waste if she did not use all the raw materials, as Wayne Group would pay for all of them. She plundered hard and added 10 sets of all kinds of high-tech arrowheads. She also got a lot of Miss Firefly's kerosene with the help of Catgirl and made 10 flame arrows. Because Bane was recovering from his injuries, a few city officials were rescued by Gordon. They were all chubby and did not look like they had been abused. The mayor, who was the leader, was frightened by Gordon's military power. Fortunately, there were no rumors of Chen Qiao's mutiny in foreign countries. Otherwise, he would have thought that the old director was up to something. He gave the authority of the city to the old director, and hid in his house with the excuse that he was too injured. Thea was busy during the day and studied the painting at night when no one was around. She had used various instruments to measure it. The painting was indeed thousands of years old, but there was no pattern that matched the painting. That night, she thought about it for half the night. She was so restless that she could not fall asleep. The faint whisper floated in her ears again. However, no matter how hard she tried, she could not make out what it was saying. Just as she thought, did I get Gotham's disease and become schizophrenic? The characters with dual personalities in the anime are all amazing, but I really don't want to become like that. Come to me. I can help you. I'm not a bad person. The voice this time was different from the one she heard before. It was a little muffled, as if it came from underground. Let's go and see. She immediately made up her mind. Of course, it was not because the other party said that he was not a bad person. In this day and age, no bad person would say that they were bad. Every villain who was defeated had lofty ideals. Therefore, she did not take the words seriously. She would analyze the problem in detail when they met. Chapter 115. Ever since she changed into the Kevlar combat suit provided by Batman, the original antiviral suit had been eliminated. The new suit was able to withstand pressure, bulletproof, and sharp objects. It also had good breathability and moisturizing properties. Although it was not as fast as Superman or Supergirl, who could tear off her shirt and fly out, it was much more efficient than before. After changing, Thea did not inform anyone. She slung her weapon over her shoulder, jumped on the skateboard, and flew towards the direction of the sound. Although she was no longer in command, she did not stop paying attention to Gotham's weather. Every now and then, she would instruct the old director to shoot up into the sky. Out of respect for her, the higher-ups followed her orders without hesitation. That little bit of money was just fuel for Batman. Of course, this was referring to the fuel for the Batfighter. The speed at which the cumulus clouds accumulated could not withstand her daily destruction. She could now see the bright moonlight at night. She did not know how much crime had decreased, but at least it was much more pleasing to the eye. Using the bright moonlight, she identified the direction. The voice was still occasionally heard. Come to me. I can help you. It seemed to be coming from the south. Gotham was a large port city. The east was connected to the sea, the north and west were inland. As for the south, Thea only remembered that there was no one there. It was a muddy swamp. Although she had many doubts in her mind, she still entered a state of concentration. She did not fly at the highest speed. She constantly observed her surroundings and carefully flew towards the direction of the sound. As the surroundings became more and more desolate, her perceptive sense did not send out any warning signals. Her infrared scan did not show any signs of heat from large animals. "I'm here, young one." A low voice sounded from below. Thea took out a frost arrow and knocked it on her bow. She gradually lowered her altitude and carefully prepared for any attacks that might follow. However, when she descended to an altitude of 20 meters, her surroundings were still desolate. No matter how she looked around, she could not see any signs of life nearby. "Where are you?" Although it was silly to ask, she really did not see this so-called person who could help her. "I'm out. I'm not a bad person." Following his words, a gurgling sound of water could be heard. The swamp below began to ripple. A certain green guy that looked like a large sludge monster slowly crawled out of the swamp. Vines were flying everywhere now and then. Tons of mud was suddenly pulled into the air by the figure, and then fell back into the swamp because of gravity. Thea stared blankly at the 5-meter-tall green humanoid creature in front of her. Who was this? Or rather, what was this thing? She looked at the bow in her hand. Her archery skills, which had been successful in the past, did not give her any sense of security at all. Could her arrows hurt this guy who was 5 meters tall and weighed several tons? The only thing that gave her courage was the skateboard under her feet. If she couldn't win, she could still run. Maybe. She couldn't say a single word. She quietly watched as the tall green creature moved around a few times, rubbing its face and stretching its neck. Guessing that she was not on its menu, Thea shouted loudly, "Did you summon me?" She had no choice. They were at least 50 meters apart. She was afraid that he would not hear her even if she shouted. However, it took him half a minute to respond. These short 30 seconds were enough to make her anxious. She was afraid that he would use his ultimate skill to kill her instantly. "It's me, young one," the green creature replied slowly. This made the short-tempered Thea's eyebrows twitch. If she could not defeat him, she would definitely teach him a lesson. What do you want from me?" Thea knew that she had to lower her head when she was under someone else's roof. She lowered her altitude to the same level as him and asked respectfully. "It's a long story. Be patient," the green creature said calmly. Thea felt that this guy did not seem to have any bad intentions. She could only say that she was very patient and that they could talk until dawn. "I'm not a bad person." Thea did not understand why he kept emphasizing this point. It remained to be seen if he was really not a bad person or if he was just trying to numb her. "I'm a botanist. I became like this because of an experiment. My original name was Alec Holan. Of course, no one calls me that anymore. They all call me the Swamp Monster." The giant green creature, or rather, the Swamp Monster, sighed when he talked about the past. However, he quickly put the past aside and talked about the purpose of today's visit. "There are many supernatural beings in this world. I'm one of them. Our leader detected a supernatural reaction on your body. That's why he ordered us to come in contact with you." Thea's mind was filled with question marks. What did he mean by that? Was there a supernatural reaction on her body? Was she about to awaken her superpower? In her memory, version 1.0, Thea was just a normal person. She had spent half her life under the wings of the Green Arrow. She ran around everywhere and had a few boyfriends who were all courting death. It could be said that she would die if she came into contact with them. Since when did being a loner count as a superpower? "I don't quite understand what you mean. Are you here to warn me or to capture me?" It wasn't that Thea always looked down on others with malice. It was just that the people in this world were like that. They would burn and slice people up for no reason. The Swamp Monster shook his head. "I'm here to help you. I've said that before." Very good and very powerful. Every villain said that they wanted to help others at the beginning. Their methods of help were usually daggers, explosives, brainwashing, and the like. Thea didn't say anything. She waited for him to continue. "You should have obtained some kind of sacred relic. This relic awakened your bloodline. You're not a normal person. You have the legacy of the ancient sages." Relic? This wasn't hard to guess. The painting that Catwoman stole from the killer moth was the beginning of everything. Because she didn't know whether this was a blessing or a curse, she brought that strange painting with her when she went out. As for the bloodline, it was a little confusing. Was it brought about by the fusion, or did she have it in the first place? This was a bloodline. It sounded so high and mighty. What bloodline limit, D-clan? Weren't they all cheats brought about by the bloodline? But did she really have such a thing? Although she was a little afraid that this big green guy would snatch her painting, she still took it out. The relic you're talking about is this, right? As for the bloodline, can you explain it? The swamp monster revealed a smile that he thought was kind, but Thea thought was terrifying. Only you know your bloodline. I used to be a botanist, but now I'm not even a human. I can't determine the source of your bloodline. Only I know? What do I know? Thea's brain was about to become mush. Just when she was about to say that she couldn't remember, the scenery in the painting flashed in her mind, and her family name that she had never shown before. Merlin. Chapter 116. The great wizard Merlin was a legendary figure that everyone in Europe and the United States knew about. The meeting between the great wizard and King Arthur, and the legend of the 12 Knights, had reached the point where almost everyone knew about it. But was this Merlin, who was so famous, the same person as Malcolm Merlin? She had been painstakingly searching for 8 generations of the Quinn family's ancestors. It turned out that the truth was so close to her. But was this really the truth? She looked at her own hands. Her 5 slender fingers were white and full of strength. Whether it was a bow or a sword or a dagger, she could use them all skillfully. But no matter how she looked at it, it did not look like she could shoot fireballs or icicles. Moreover, in terms of bloodline, Old Ma's bloodline should be purer than hers. The old man had been scheming all his life, but in the end, it could be said that he became more and more miserable. She did not see him awaken any great ability in adversity. The so-called bloodline also did not help him kill the Green Arrow and the Ninja Master. Could he become a wizard? Thea imagined the scene of Malcolm wearing a robe and shooting fireballs. That scene was too beautiful. You must be kidding me. However, the swamp creature in front of him seemed to be telling the truth, and it didn't seem to be a lie. Thea pointed at herself. Do you have my bloodline now? But I don't feel any difference. The swamp creature did not speak. Countless vines of plants rose from the mud below him. Wrapped in a variety of dazzling plants, the vines lifted up a dark red vessel. Looking at the clean, cup-like vessel that was taken out of the mud in front of her, Thea now truly understood what it meant to be untainted by mud. Needless to say, this was definitely a treasure, but it was definitely not meant to be with her. Sure enough, the swamp creature spoke. This is the soul awakening cup of the leader's wife. It can successfully awaken your bloodline. As for whether it succeeds or not, it depends on you. Although Thea had never heard of this so-called wife, she knew that she was a big boss in a certain industry. At this point, there was nothing to worry about. How do I use it? Drip your blood into the cup. It will search for the holy relic on your body and successfully open the land of heritage. The swamp creature probably knew that he looked a little scary, and he didn't know how brave Thea was. Using his past experience as a human, he only felt that if he was a little girl, he would have fainted for 10 minutes. He controlled the vines to put the cup on the ground and slowly took 2 steps back. Thea descends from the air to the ground. She doesn't dare to leave the skateboard. She walks around the inconspicuous cup twice. She doesn't see anything wrong with it. Thea rolled up her sleeves and made a cut on her arm. Fresh blood quickly covered the bottom of the cup. Just as Thea was wondering how much blood was needed to activate this thing, she felt a hook hooked onto her belly button and pulled upwards. She wanted to shout, but the rapid wind had already made her unable to speak. She only felt that she had been stuffed into a narrow tunnel. Her entire body was enveloped by a huge wave of air, and she was flying at high speed in this extremely long tunnel. After an unknown amount of time, when she regained consciousness, there was only one thought in her mind. This user experience sucks. He patted his butt and wanted to stand up. Only then did he realize that the combat uniform he was wearing was gone. Instead, he was wearing a beggar's outfit. Alright, calling it a beggar's outfit was a bit of an exaggeration. However, this coarse cloth jacket didn't look gorgeous at all. It's just that this jacket looks thick, but in reality, it feels very bad to the touch. What's going on? Where's my underwear? Thea realized that she only has one piece of clothing. It's very empty and uncomfortable. She can't help but feel a little annoyed at the guy who designed this part of the process. But fortunately, she's a woman of the underworld and doesn't care about trifles. She didn't bring her Kevlar, bow, dagger and so on with her. Only the sword of Azrael that she previously seized is lying quietly on the ground. Thea jumped twice on the spot. Fortunately, her thing isn't too big. Even if she doesn't have any clothes, it won't be too much of a burden. This is good news. Because the surrounding looks very similar to the forest path in the painting, Thea looked very much like the forest path in the painting. The trees were tall and dense, and there were signs of a battle. As the saying goes, don't enter the forest. However, do I have a choice now? She pulled out her sword and slashed at the nearby trees. Not bad, this is my sword. I didn't get myself a fake one. Looking around, it seems that this is the only stone path in front of her. This path is very long and winding, and it seems to go straight to the top of the mountain. Thea took a deep breath. The feeling of not having any underwear lingered on her body. She tried her best to use the secret technique that Madame Shiva taught her. She abandoned all distracting thoughts and focused on walking up the mountain. The path was neatly built. Thea didn't know if this is a real scene or a world in the painting. She didn't see any animals or birds along the way. Her surroundings were quiet. Occasionally, there would be wind blowing, but it didn't cause any disturbances to her sharp senses. Just when she was about 1/5 of the way up the mountain, she received a warning from her perceptive sense. There was a tingling sensation that seemed to be stabbing her brain. Someone is ambushing me. Thea quickly saw the target. A guy with a face full of black fog and a body full of armor jumped down from a tree and slashed at Thea. At this time, the enemy was in mid-air, and his body was full of openings. In theory, it was the best time to attack. However, because she didn't know how strong his armor was, Thea chose to dodge. Thea did a side roll in advance to avoid the heavy slash. She didn't get up, but used the sharp sword in her hand to slash at the unprotected foot of the enemy. The armored man reacted quickly. He lifted his foot to step on the edge of her sword. At the same time, he used the huge two-handed sword to slash at Thea's head. This guy is very powerful. Thea used her agility to pull away and focused on defense. She peeked at the opponent's attack pattern and waited for the opportunity to find a flaw to determine the winner. Through the continuous exchanges, Thea gradually figured out the ins and outs of this guy. Looking at his skills, he definitely wasn't a nobody when he was alive. His two-handed sword danced vigorously, and ordinary people would have been hacked to death if they encountered him. Thinking of this, Thea was a little puzzled. Is my bloodline really Merlin's? Why did the mage selection have a martial arts competition? Or was it that the mages of Ancestor Merlin's time were all warriors? Although she was a little puzzled, she still easily dealt with this guy. Thanks to the ninja master's knowledge, Thea had long seen through this guy's swordsmanship. It was an ancient English battle formation swordsmanship. Whether or not he was a knight of the Round Table was unknown, but this set of swordsmanship was something that Thea had learned before. Moreover, as a master who had been in seclusion for 800 years, he had long studied the ways to break these swordsmanship. As long as she followed the recipe, she would be able to defeat this guy. Soon, Thea found the flaw that she was waiting for. The Black Fog Knight used a move where he held the sword with both hands and stabbed forward. Thea used the edge of her sword to block the knight's sword. Then, she charged forward fiercely and stabbed the sword in her hand into the knight's face. The Black Fog Knight immediately stopped. The shocking killing intent from before dissipated in an instant. He crossed his sword in his right hand and knelt on one knee on his left knee. He performed a salute that Thea couldn't understand, and then disappeared like a breeze. Chapter 117. After killing the Black Mist Knight, Thea did not let down her guard. She carefully made her way to the top of the mountain. The second half of the journey could be described as uneventful. In fact, by the time she was halfway up the mountain, she had a rough idea of what was going on. The original purpose of this checkpoint was probably not to let the apprentice sorcerers slay the knights blocking the way. If he guessed correctly, it should be to test the reaction speed and basic physical fitness of the people who came. To put it bluntly, it was to select the person who would run away in the face of danger, and the person who could run away quickly. However, Master Merlin probably did not expect his descendants to have such a weirdo like Thea. She killed the obstacle with just a few punches and kicks. The Black Mist Knight's martial arts were outstanding even today. The medieval ancestors of the Merlin family could only scurry away in front of him. It was impossible that ancient martial arts were better than modern martial arts. A skill must be more refined and refined. After countless generations of refinement, the final version must be stronger than the original version. Of course, if there was inner force or true inner force, it would be another matter. Anyway, Thea did not know that there was such a power system in this world. Otherwise, A ninja master who practiced for more than 800 years would have ascended. Phew! Thea climbed to the top of the mountain. The mountain was really high. She took a deep breath and stabbed her sword into the ground. Although she did not meet any enemies along the way, she did not feel relaxed. She wondered how her ancestors who were chased all the way to the top of the mountain were feeling. They must be so tired that their tongues were hanging out. She hoped that the second level would not be too difficult. The ground in front of her was not so much the top of the mountain. It was more like a square. The entire top of the mountain was flattened. In the depths of her sight was a large British-style palace. The palace door was at least 10 meters high. There were several tall but damaged knight statues around it. Thea did not recklessly push the door open. She wanted to observe for a while. Besides, judging by the height of the door, she might not have the strength to push it open. It seemed that the designer of the level did not want the challengers to push it so recklessly. The two thick and wide doors slowly opened. Thump, thump. Heavy footsteps kept beating on Thea's heart. Under her shocked gaze, a huge figure slowly walked out from behind the door. It had 2 horns on its head, crimson-yellow eyes, 4 feet and 2 wings. Its body was covered in lava-like scales and it had a tail as long as its body. Red dragon? Fire dragon? Thea didn't know what the scientific name of this thing was, but she knew that she was no match for it. Not to mention her, even Bane couldn't defeat this thing even if he used up all the venom in the jar. Uncle Merlin really wants to select a mage? His previous thoughts must have been wrong. How could those medieval village women and local nobles who had never left their homes be able to defeat this thing? He must have been scared shitless. Or could it be that the way he completed the first stage was too unusual, and the result of taking an unusual path was to increase the difficulty for himself? Thea looked down at the sword in her hand. No matter how she looked at it, it didn't look like it could slay a dragon. Could it be that he still had to test his agility by running in while the red dragon was attacking? Thea shook her head. The dragon came out and squatted at the gate. It had no intention of getting up. In an instant, she thought of 7 or 8 possibilities. There were game guides from her previous life and various fairy tales here, but she found that none of them corresponded to her current situation. Her current situation was described with a big headache. Just as she was thinking hard about the purpose of the stage design, the red dragon in the distance seemed to be very dissatisfied with her motionless. It didn't do anything and spat out a fireball. Thea cursed. Did the prerequisite of a mage apprentice have to be a dragon slayer? Or was it that the ordinary people in Merlin's time were so fierce that killing a dragon was like killing a chicken? In the face of a fireball the size of a wash basin, any skills were useless. Looking at the color of the flames, she knew that the temperature was definitely not low. Even Miss Firefly's fire-immune constitution might not be able to withstand it. Bang! Boom! While constantly dodging the fireballs, Thea was also looking for a way to break out of the situation. But this guy just stayed at the gate and didn't move. She didn't have a bow and arrows, and even if she did, it would be useless. Close combat? You must be kidding. She didn't have 39 friends to help her now. What magic? Thea was here to learn magic. She didn't know how to do it at all. Ha! Thea, who was running around, inadvertently found that a piece of ground was burned by the fireball. It seemed that there was only fire and no chemical reaction of burning oxygen. It was not scientific to talk about oxygen in such a magical place. Thea didn't have time to think about it. She rushed to the edge of the fire pit and touched it with her hand. Indeed, there was no sign of high temperature. She put her sword into the bottom of the pit and waited for a few seconds. She pulled out her sword and found that there was no sign of burning or high temperature on the sword. Was it fake? No, she touched the edge of the fire pit with her sword. There was still a physical impact. Vaguely understanding the purpose of this level, Thea reached out her left hand and imagined a pistol. In an instant, a Beretta 92F appeared in her hand. The weight of the gun was very real. She tried to shoot it again. The sound and trajectory were exactly the same as a real gun. She got it. This was a test of her imagination. No matter what kind of weapon she imagined, as long as she could defeat the red dragon, she would pass. Wasn't it just a test of imagination? Thea was not afraid of anyone with the mindset of the people from Earth in her previous life. So what if he was Mage Merlin? Did he think that the most powerful creature for ordinary people was a dragon? Not to mention his strength, his knowledge was just so. Thea first imagined a governor version of the Terminator. The burly man was instantly formed, and after receiving the order, he charged forward with a Gatling gun. The red dragon was indeed powerful. In the face of the governor's provocation, it responded with a wash-basin-sized fireball. Neither of them dodged. In less than half a minute, the governor died heroically. Thea did not waste this half a minute. She immediately thought of the giant robot in the Pacific Rim. The robot she was operating was the indescribable Crimson Storm built by the country. It was red all over, 150 meters tall, and held a serrated sword in each of its 3 arms. It rushed forward aggressively. Suddenly seeing such a huge creature, the red dragon that was lying on the ground pretending to be dead was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Although he was an illusion, he still had his intelligence and experience from when he was alive due to the support of magic. He swore with his 1,000-year-old dragon age that he had never seen such a huge humanoid creature before. Was this the legendary Titan? A 150 meters tall and weighing over 1,000 tons of metal against a red dragon that was 20 meters tall and less than 100 meters long. The whole process could only be described as dog torture. Thea felt that she had never felt so good in her life. One of her hands held the dragon's neck to prevent him from moving. The other 2 hands held the sword and slashed fiercely. At first, she used a few sword moves, but later, she stopped. Slashing and slashing was enough to deal with this guy. Chapter 118. The aggrieved red dragon didn't even have the chance to use its dragon wings or shadow flame before it was pressed to the ground by Thea and cut into pieces. In theory, the dragon would die if its head was cut off, but this was obviously an illusion version of the dragon, so it was hard to say whether the fatal wound was in its head. Thea didn't think that her time was precious. Like mincing meat, she cut the majestic red dragon into pieces of meat that were less than half a meter long and wide. She searched around but didn't find any forging materials like dragon crystals or dragon cores. She sighed. Just now, she found that there was a trick to pass this level. There were 4 broken knight statues at the door. The designer's goal was to use these statues as reference objects to simulate the classic scene of a knight and a mage working together to kill a dragon. But she didn't know which generation of ancestors had misunderstood or deliberately caused trouble for their descendants. But he or she directly brought the statues to life and fought a great battle with the red dragon. The 4 statues were now piled up on the side like garbage, and if one didn't look carefully, one wouldn't know the specific meaning behind it. Anyway, she passed. Thea controlled the robot to put her on the ground. She was 150 meters away, so she didn't dare to cancel it suddenly. She would fall to her death. Carrying her sword, she walked around the pile of meat and walked into the hall. Not long after she entered the hall, the 2 doors closed in a very old-fashioned way. She pouted. How uncreative. From the outside, it looked spacious and tall, but the space inside was actually not that big. Thea walked a few steps and came to the side of a desk. There were a lot of parchment papers on the table, 3 quill pens were placed diagonally on the table, and a small bottle with very little ink was thrown carelessly on the ground. Thea was more and more sure that there was something wrong with this scene. It was so messy and disorderly that it didn't seem like an examination at all. There wasn't even someone to clean up the table. Moreover, there wasn't even a prompt along the way. She didn't ask for the system to make it like a system fairy, but even if it put up a notice board, it should at least let the candidates know what to prepare. No matter what the examination was, she should clean up the table first. But when Thea touched the parchment paper, a huge hourglass suddenly appeared in the originally empty place. She roughly estimated that the sand wasn't moving too fast, so it should take about an hour. But what was he going to do in the next hour? Thea looked around again. The decorations were quite luxurious. There were carpets, murals, lamps, and a bunch of decorations. Thea scratched her head. After all, when Merlin was active, Sherlock Holmes' great-grandfather hadn't been reincarnated yet. But just in case, she still looked around. Many of the items were just decorations and could not be removed. Thea wasted 10 minutes and finally confirmed the target. It was the thing on the desk. He picked up a piece of paper and read it carefully. What a mess! Thea put aside the so-called practical application of mana and the secondary connection between the earth and water. If he couldn't understand this piece of paper, his ancestors wouldn't be able to either. He could only spend another 5 minutes sifting through all the parchments and find a few that he could understand. It was really simple. The paper was filled with basic knowledge, such as the composition of the universe, the basic framework of the world, and so on. For Thea, whose learning ability had been enhanced to 2. 0. It was a piece of cake. She used her extraordinary intelligence to forcibly record down the information that conflicted with her original worldview. Then, she began to read the scrolls that she couldn't understand. She realized that the next examination was probably a written one. The quill and ink didn't look like a souvenir for her. Thea used the skills she learned from her previous life to deal with exam-oriented education. Some of them had some similarities with modern physics, while others were nonsense. She didn't care if she understood them or not and just memorized them all. The learning methods from her previous life were a great help. Combined with her powerful memory, she could say that no matter if it was the Ninja Master or Batman, she wouldn't lose to them in terms of learning speed. There were more than 10 parchments with tens of thousands of words that went against common sense. In less than half an hour, she had memorized all of them. She also used the last 10 minutes to comb through her entire memory. The knowledge was very heterogeneous. Although it was the result of a large system, Thea felt that it was too scattered. It felt like someone had put it all together as a prank. As for the truth, she did not care at this time. The whole assessment site seemed to have been used many times, and the painting she got had probably passed through many generations. With the erosion of time and man-made destruction, Thea felt that it should not have been so difficult in the beginning. Perhaps there were some instructions left with the painting for future generations? But at this point, no matter what happened here, as long as she passed this level, she should be able to pass. She could still vaguely feel this. She calmed her breathing and kept herself in the best condition. She slowly adjusted her state of mind. When the sand in the hourglass completely fell, a new piece of parchment appeared on the table. The original ones had all disappeared, leaving only the quill and ink bottle. Thea immediately took the parchment and looked at it carefully. There were less than 20 questions on the whole paper. They were all questions about how the world was composed of several major elements, the colors of flames when burning, the refraction of light, and so on. She knew that she had been tricked by this messy environment. What she saw later wasn't the content of the examination at all. Just looking at the first few papers was enough to deal with it. Thea gave the unknown guy a middle finger. "Don't let me see you in person, or I'll beat the shit out of you." Although the questions were very simple, she still answered them seriously. In less than 5 minutes, she finished all the questions. After checking several times and confirming that they were all correct, Thea was a little dumbfounded. "Who should I give this paper to? Hey, I'm done. Is anyone here?" She stupidly shouted at the empty room for a long time, but no one came out. She fainted. Ancestor Merlin, don't tell me that in order to take care of the descendants who just learned how to read, the examination time was set especially long? Thinking about it, it was possible. In the Middle Ages, not to mention the common people, even the king who could write his own name was considered a high-quality person. At that time, the king was more like the leader of a society than the leader of a country. Many nobles didn't know how to write their own names, so they could only wear a seal on their hands and press it when it was their turn to sign. She waited patiently for a while and found that still no one paid attention to her. "Since you are so assured, I won't be polite." Thea left her seat and looked around again. Although the hope was not big, what if she could find something good? Using the treasure hunting skills taught by Big Sister Catwoman, Thea began to explore the surrounding walls and decorations. Her efforts paid off. She found nothing on the walls, but she found a pitch-black dagger in an ornament decorated with antlers. Chapter 119. The dagger was only the size of a palm, with a double-edged blade. The workmanship was not exquisite, and there were no decorations on the handle. No matter how one looked at it, it was just an ordinary weapon. Thea played with the dagger in her hand for a while, but she did not see anything special about it. She did not know if she could bring it out, so she put it on her belt and continued to search around. Time flew by, and when she repeatedly confirmed that there was nothing in the room, more than an hour had passed. There was no clock in the room, so she could not estimate the exact number. She could only make a rough estimate. Bored, she put her legs on the table and closed her eyes to rest. Just as she was getting impatient and was about to get up and push the door open, the answer scroll on the table disappeared silently like it did in the beginning. Then, when she was unprepared, an invisible flame seemed to burn from within her body. Wah! What is this ghost? She really didn't know what to do with this thing that she couldn't see or touch. She only felt that all the blood in her body was desperately rushing towards that ball of flame, and a large amount of blood was being converted into an unknown substance. Every second felt extremely long. With the inexplicable loss of blood, She felt that her ability to think was getting weaker and weaker. Her mind was blank. Who am I? Where am I now? Her body was gradually taken over by instinct, and her consciousness was slowly swallowed by the endless nothingness. When she regained her sense of existence, Thea found that she had already left the scroll and returned to the starting point. The swamp monster was still staring at her with its blood-red eyes from afar. She touched her body, and the Kevlar was still intact on her body. The dagger that she found earlier was hanging conspicuously on her waist. But she was not in the mood to care about the dagger now. She only felt that her body was sore and weak, and she had no strength at all. What happened to me? And how long has it been? The target of the question was naturally the swamp monster not far away, but her voice was a little soft, and she did not know if the swamp monster could hear her. The swamp monster scrutinized Thea from head to toe. His terrifying gaze gave her goosebumps. He slowly said, "You do have extraordinary potential. Your bloodline has been successfully activated." Thea didn't know if she had any potential. She only felt that she was about to die. Her body's strength was less than 30% of its usual strength. Her breath was unstable and her steps were weak. She sweated after taking 2 steps. She checked her pulse and found that her heart rate was much slower than usual. She touched the skin on her face and found that it was no longer as elastic as before. What kind of injuries did I sustain? He wanted to use his heart to feel the so-called bloodline of the swamp monster, but he felt dizzy and his vision blurred. He could only see double. This was probably a symptom of lack of blood. The swamp monster seemed to have noticed that she was so weak that a gust of wind could blow her away, so it slowly explained. "Don't worry, this is a good thing. When you first awaken, there will be a process of purifying your blood. As for why you're so weak, I don't know either. After all, I'm not a magician." The swamp monster even made a gesture of spreading its hands after it finished speaking. However, its 5-meter-tall body did not look cute at all. Thea didn't have the energy to complain. What it said was as good as not saying anything. What a jerk. Even though she was so weak that she couldn't even defeat Director Gordon. Director Gordon? Achoo! Who's scolding me? Fortunately, she rode out on a skateboard, so she could still fly back to the camp slowly. She waved at the swamp monster and was about to say goodbye. He was quite friendly to her. Judging from the size of this guy, it was obvious that he wasn't a magician. It was useless to ask. She should go back and rest early. "This is for you." The swamp monster put away the cup and took out a green fruit from the ground and handed it to Thea. "What's this?" Thea looked at the fruit. It was the size of a coconut and had an oily body. Its emerald green color reminded her of cyanide. Its surface was also covered with strange patterns. Was this edible? It wasn't a devil's fruit, was it? Was it a logia fruit? But Thea knew that it was impossible even if she used her toes to think. "I don't know which ancestor's bloodline you awakened, but the earth can bear everything. This fruit can further awaken your bloodline. This is a gift from me. I can see every corner of the city. You've brought light to Gotham. You're a good child. Justice needs your strength." Even though she was praised by a 5-meter-tall green creature, Thea was still quite happy. It seemed that there were some benefits to her urging the rain every day. She smiled as she took the fruit. This thing could awaken her bloodline again? It didn't seem too bad. Thea was a little scared after her previous experience. Plus, she was extremely weak. She should keep the fruit for now. Looking at the swamp monster slowly sinking into the ground, Thea didn't have time to count her gains. She found the direction of the camp and flew back. Fortunately, after the 2 recent attacks on Arkham and the fight between the major crime families in the city, the villains in the city had all been summoned away. The spectacular scene of being greeted by rocket launchers when she first arrived in Gotham did not happen again. Thus, she was able to safely fly back to the base. She wanted to sneak back to her room, but she still startled Felicity, who lived next door. This girl had been getting closer and closer to Catwoman recently. The 2 of them were playing games in the room. When they heard her movement, they both came out to ask, "Thea, what's wrong?" Catwoman had been avoiding her for the past few days because she thought of her as a big boss. But now that they met face to face, she couldn't pretend not to know her. She quickly asked when she saw that something was wrong with her pale face and unsteady steps. How should she explain? If she said that she had obtained a bloodline or something, it wouldn't be a problem if these people knew, but she had to consider Batman's unnatural attitude of hatred. She couldn't afford to lose the reputation she had gained. Just as she was thinking hard about how to come up with a good lie, Felicity, who always had a big imagination, looked at her for a while before she said in a tone of realization, "You're having your period? You're using so much this time." In a daze, Thea took a while to understand what she was referring to. F***ck, you're bleeding so much in one go. She had lost almost a third of her blood, but Sia thought about it and realized that she had indeed lost a lot of blood in the past few days. Although the quantity of blood she had sold at one time was a bit higher than the standard, at least it was an explanation. Although it was a bit awkward, she tacitly accepted this fact. Catwoman immediately understood what she meant. She was very enthusiastic and helped her back to her room like an old lady. Then, she volunteered to boil some brown sugar water for her. Barbara, who lived nearby, heard the news and jumped out of Robin's room to help. She didn't know if she was in the mood to watch a good show or if she was really concerned about her comrade. Batman was doing recovery training. When he heard that she was injured, he hurried over. But when he saw that she was surrounded by women, he used his rich knowledge to surpass Lex Luthor's IQ to determine the specific situation and ran away. Chapter 120. For the next few days, Thea used the excuse of being attacked by her aunt to deal with everything. Needless to say, this reason was really very good and very strong. Everyone who saw her showed a bright smile, and all of them were concerned about her well-being, afraid that she would suddenly die. With her body's hematopoietic function activated, Catwoman Barbara would send her some black chicken with brown sugar from time to nourish her body. She had recovered most of her combat power and could properly sort out her gains this time. In fact, she had already received a message the night before. This message was very mysterious, as if it had suddenly emerged from her soul. There was no need to read or understand it. It was completely an instinctive skill that she had mastered. From the message, she realized that every descendant of the Merlin family would master an instinctive skill, or a spell-like ability, when they successfully awakened. This skill did not require magic, gestures, or any other external conditions. As long as one had enough physical strength, they could activate this ability. Through observation, a silver-white unicorn tattoo appeared on her left shoulder blade. It could be visible or invisible. This tattoo could be said to be a dual skill. During the day, it was a yang tattoo and would constantly absorb sunlight. When the skill was activated, it would summon a unicorn to accompany her in battle until it was cancelled. At night, the tattoo would be a yin tattoo and absorb the power of the moonlight. It could use the power of the shadows to create a clone of Thea with the same ability as her. Unicorn? Thea pondered for a moment. She opened the door and saw that no one was paying attention to her. She hurriedly closed the door and windows tightly. Thea prayed silently and concentrated on the tattoo. She hoped that the movement would not be too big. She concentrated on the tattoo and activated it. A faint white smoke flashed and the assistant she had been eagerly waiting for landed in front of her. Sia's face was filled with black lines as she looked at this guy who was slightly bigger than her palm. If she took a closer look, there was indeed a horn on his forehead. He didn't randomly find a horse or donkey for her to deal with. The little unicorn did not even know where it was. It stood up in a daze on Thea's bed and looked around. It was a little confused when it realized that it was not familiar with the environment. It retracted its 4 hooves and looked around nervously. When it raised its head and saw Thea, it immediately relaxed and looked at her with its big eyes. Seeing that she didn't respond, it licked her hand with its tongue. It was quite cute. Thea unconsciously stroked its mane with her hand. It was so soft, and it felt so good to the touch. Looks like this guy won't be able to become a fighting force in a short period of time. Don't tell me I have to rely on it to kill the enemy. That night, she tried the doppelganger technique again, and the results made her feel gratified. This was different from a certain Japanese manga's cloning technique. This clone was also a physical entity that could attack and speak. Even if it was hit, it wouldn't turn into smoke and disappear. However, it would still deal fatal damage. Thea's fighting abilities could also be completely controlled by the physical entity. However, the equipment on her body could not be replicated. If the enemy knew the inside story and attacked the original body, she would be dumbfounded. However, the flaws did not obscure the beauty of the jade. They could be flexible. For example, one of them held a saber while the other held a dagger. They could circle left and right a few times and the enemy would be stunned. Thea once hid in the house and tested it. After the skill was activated, the stamina consumption would double. If the consumption per unit of time was 1, now it was 2. The damage received by the clone would not affect the original body. In theory, Thea would be fine even if the clone died 100 times. But at the same time, she wouldn't be able to learn anything the clone read. The two of them could only share some simple information. This could be considered as having its advantages and disadvantages. It was also very simple to increase the power of the Yang rune and Yin rune. The Yang rune could be exposed to the sun, and the Yin rune could be exposed to the moon. The unicorn would grow from a juvenile to an adult with the accumulation of sunlight. In the end, it would even grow a pair of wings and become the royal unicorn family. As long as it evolved to an adult, the two of them could merge. Thea would automatically have most of the unicorn's abilities and characteristics. The clones at night could also become more agile and intelligent with the accumulation of moonlight. It was even possible for 2 or 3 clones to be created at once. In order for the unicorn to grow up as soon as possible, Thea could proudly claim that she was also the kind of person who could strengthen herself by basking in the sun. In the future, she could add a deck chair next to Superman and Supergirl. Let's bask in the sun together. She didn't know what kind of talent the predecessors had. Yes, to save herself the trouble, she now called it a talent. She felt that this clone talent was still very suitable for her. After all, her mind was filled with fighting and killing. This skill had unknowingly doubled her combat power. If she wasn't afraid of exposing herself, without the technological equipment, Batman would no longer be her opponent in a one-on-one fight. Speaking of the concentration of the bloodline, it was necessary to talk about the process of blood loss at the end. Although there wasn't much information at this time, Thea could still analyze that it was a process of burning blood and returning to one's ancestral roots. She could now feel that there were 2 drops of golden blood in her heart. She didn't know if it was because she had completed the trial too well, but the purification process was completely at full power. Theoretically, the energy that could only be converted into 1 drop of blood was excessively stimulated, and 2 drops of blood were purified. This was also one of the reasons why she was so weak. A normal person would be finished after losing 15% of their blood, but she lost 30%. Looking at the suspected devil fruit that the swamp monster gave her, she didn't dare to try it lightly. At least, she had to be completely healed first. The scroll that had caused all of this had been completely destroyed. Before it was completely destroyed, it also transmitted a stream of information to her, but this information wasn't as clear as the information about her talent. The whole message was intermittent. Thea could only guess that one of her ancestors was forced to enter the secret realm because of his lover. After that, there was a lot of unknown information. In the end, he destroyed the key inheritance guide. She speculated that it might be a piece of parchment and left the world alone. It was really a sad story. Thea didn't have a trace of sympathy for this ancestor. He was the one who destroyed the assessment guide along the way, causing her to be in such a sorry state. She had to rely on guessing along the way. Other people's trials might be of normal difficulty, but hers was definitely of hell difficulty. At the same time, this ancestor who had caused so much trouble for her also sounded the alarm bell for Thea. She should still keep some cards up her sleeve. This guy was probably too arrogant, so he was targeted by someone with no bloodline, no luck, and no inheritance. If others don't have it, then why don't you keep a low profile? In the end, he was killed before he could cultivate the divine ability. If she put herself in his shoes and thought about it, if someone else had an ability and she didn't, how would she feel? She would definitely be jealous, and would definitely do everything possible to get the ability into her hands. There had been many people like this since ancient times. If this guy happened to be patient and scheming, then she could only pray that he would be able to kill her at the crucial moment. Thea instantly thought of someone who had these conditions, and she had a relationship with him after so many twists and turns. Batman, Green Arrow's good father-in-law. Ninja Master. This old guy didn't have any abilities, and had lived for 800 years by relying on the immortal pool. He must have seen aliens with abilities. If someone said that he wasn't jealous of all kinds of supernatural powers, Thea would be the first to believe it. Moreover, the more Thea thought about it, the more she felt that Thea was ambushed by Ninja Master in version 1.0 of the show, causing her to suffer irrecoverable injuries. After that, Thea's overall quality began to greatly decline, and she even withdrew from Green Arrow's team. Was there some inside story that she didn't know about? There were so many people around Green Arrow, Laurel, Sarah, Felicity, and a bunch of other women. They were all important, so why did he have to ambush Thea? Throughout the entire show, Ninja Master had only personally dealt with two people. One was Thea, and the other was Green Arrow. There were many doubts, and perhaps only Ninja Master himself knew the truth. Malcolm's experience was also very strange. He came to Nandarbart alone because of the death of his beloved wife, and Ninja Master began to teach him without hesitation. In just 2 years, he was promoted to the position of adjutant. With his 800 years of life experience, couldn't he see that Malcolm was ambitious? Wasn't he someone who lived under someone else's roof? All kinds of clues proved that he knew about ancient bloodlines. In some aspects, he even knew more about them than the descendants. After all, too many things had been buried by history over a long period of time. Was this also the reason why he valued Batman? The Wayne family had a long history, and their glory could be traced back to the Crusades in the Middle Ages. Just thinking about it gave him a headache. He picked up the dagger he had found in the trial. At first, he thought that the black blade was rusty, but after rubbing it a few times, he realized that this was the color of the dagger. There were a few words engraved on the dagger and the handle. Thea, who could barely be considered a mage apprentice, used the knowledge she had memorized and the search engine to finally understand the meaning of these words. Black Fog. Chapter 121. Through the transformation of her bloodline, Thea's perception had undergone earth-shattering changes. At this time, the originally illusory perception in her body and the spiritual power derived from her bloodline merged to form a looming energy, which could be called magic power for the time being. When she used this magic power to communicate with the inscriptions on the dagger, she would use a special method to change the appearance of the original magic power and launch it out. The consumption of magic power was very small, and the consumption was the dagger's own energy. The user only played the role of guiding the direction. But it was this function that made the essential difference between a normal person and a mage. After playing so many games, Thea quickly figured out the purpose of this weapon. It could create a pure black fog in the line of sight. She didn't know what the original designer thought, but in any case, outsiders couldn't see through the fog, and the people in the fog couldn't see anything, including Thea, who was the one who released the fog. This thing was originally used for running away, right? But now, technology had developed to the point where there were smoke bombs. The magic power of this dagger was somewhat useless, and the black fog was only aimed at human vision. Using thermal imaging technology, one could still see that there was a living person inside. Thea played with the dagger a few times. The main character could pick up a storage ring or a dragon egg after falling down, but she only got a broken dagger. What bad luck. She rewrote the contents of the parchment that she had hurriedly memorized and tried to find common points through the engraving method on the dagger. But to be honest, the effect was really bad, and there were too few references. There were some results on the internet, such as the story of Merlin and the female ghost, the battle between the snowman and the mage Merlin, and all kinds of information mixed together, and it was impossible to distinguish between the truth and the lies. Thea didn't dare to practice recklessly. Most people would go crazy at a high level, and it would be too ridiculous if she practiced the wrong path as soon as she started. There was also no one to guide her. The swamp monster did mention the Xanadu madam, but he also said that she was a mysterious person, and that she was the descendant of some ancient race and could live forever. Compared to her, the ninja master was like a child. For this kind of person, her concept of time must be incomparably indifferent. It was very likely that she would only realize this matter 10 years later. If he waited for her, it would be too late. In fact, there were still a few magical heroes in this world. At least Thea knew of Constantine's great name. However, she remembered that this person was like a reincarnated pervert. She didn't want to be attracted to him. Since he couldn't figure it out, he could only take it one step at a time. First, he had to recover his body, adjust his condition to its peak, and then eat the fruit of the earth that the swamp monster gave him. Although her body was weak and she couldn't practice martial arts with Batman, she didn't completely rest. Considering the fact that his future enemies were all monsters, he had to increase his own strength. Magic was not something that could be mastered in a short period of time. It required a lot of study and accumulation. Of course, like Shazam, who dreamed every day, "I want to fly to the sky and stand side by side with the sun, the world is waiting for me to change," he would shout, "Shazam," to the sky when he encountered a situation, and then a thick purple lightning would strike him, and then the originally thin and weak little boy would become a muscular magician with a height of 180 centimeters. Thea disdained this kind of quick method. What was the difference between this and the indescribable countries, Lord Guan Yu? His foundation didn't increase at all, but every time he was possessed, he would consume a lot of blood essence. This method was simply stupid. If this kind of trash was still in the Xianxia world, he would be possessed in minutes. During this period of time, taking advantage of the good moment when her relationship with Batman was at an all-time high, Thea asked to borrow the Bat Belt to take a look. Bruce didn't refuse this junior who he valued very much. Thea could finally see this legendary belt. Before, it was exaggerated, but after careful analysis, it actually had a very simple principle. Because he used a lot of nanotechnology in the belt, his weapons were not suitable for himself, but this nanotechnology was very high-end, which made Thea's eyes light up. Batman's nanotechnology was not the same as Ray Palmer's. One of the two nanoscaled weapons, the other nanoscaled himself. It could be said that they started from the same place but ended up on different paths. If she gave the nanosuit to Batman, with his pride, he wouldn't turn into a small person to fight. Similarly, the Atom Man couldn't use his various weapons because he didn't have such a high martial arts foundation. This belt inspired Thea a lot, and she had begun to develop her own new technological equipment. The skateboard's improvement in a short period of time was limited, and it was really powerless against a bull-like enemy like Bane. If there were only one or two of them it would be fine, but there were a lot of strong bad guys in the United States. Her strength was already the weakest in the bucket, whether it was close combat or long-range bow drawing. Her strength had become more and more limited. After considering several factors, she set her sights on Marvel's Winter Soldier next door. Of course, she wouldn't be crazy enough to cut off her arm and replace it with a metal arm. She was going to use Batman's technology to nano the metal arm, which was usually divided into 3 parts. They were the arm ring, the bracelet, and the ring, which were all common accessories for women. No matter the occasion, wearing accessories would not be very conspicuous. When encountering an enemy, she could turn on the switch on the bracelet, and the ring would begin to flip over to cover the palm, the bracelet would become the wrist guard and forearm armor, and the arm ring would become the upper arm armor. After the 3 were connected, the energy block designed by the Quinn Group would provide power. In theory, the limit was 10 tons. Thea also designed 3 holes in the palm armor so that 3 claws could pop out after clenching her fist. Of course, this was copied from Uncle Wolf. Considering that she might attract the attention of a ninja master, she felt uncomfortable facing bad guys with her bare hands. She couldn't always bring a sword with her, so this was a stopgap measure. As for whether it was a one-handed mechanical arm or a two-handed one, in the end, she decided to use one hand, and like Winter Soldier, it would be the left arm. Of course, she was not a brainless fan. She considered shooting arrows and guns with her right hand. No matter how clever the mechanical arm was, it would not be as flexible as her fingers. She only needed a lot of strength, and her left arm was enough. Magic could not be seen in the light now, but technological weapons were fine. She did not want to waste Batman, a great master of mechanical manufacturing. She took the design and asked him for advice. Master Bruce could only express his admiration for her wonderful ideas. This mechanical arm had a lot of conflicts with his existing equipment. He would not use it, but he could still give some advice. The 2 worked together to improve the overall design, combining several technological achievements of the 2 companies. The new design made the metal arm lighter and the output power per unit of time higher. Batman had some complaints about her design of hiding claws in the equipment and secretly attacking the enemy at the critical moment. Thea could only express her concerns, such as women wearing too little clothes in public and having no place to put their weapons. Master Bruce could not comment on her mentality of touching bad guys every day, so he could only agree with this design. Chapter 122. The group rested for 7 days. Considering the secret weapon that Talia mentioned, they had long wanted to charge in. However, they were worried that Thea, who was an important combat force, would need to recuperate, so they waited for a full week. As for whether they could go without her, they felt that it would be safer to bring her along. A few days wouldn't make a difference, so it was better to wait. During the journey, Thea even dragged them to the Wayne family's private beach to take pictures. She had no choice. She told Moira that they were going to Malibu Beach, so she had to at least take a few pictures to fool her. When she put on her swimsuit, Thea realized that she had grown a little taller. Originally, she had some scars on her body from training, but after the blood baptism, the old scars and bruises were all gone. Her skin was tighter and smoother than before. Westerners, especially women, had relatively large pores. From afar they looked fine, but up close, their skin was not as smooth as Eastern women's. Sia's skin was now very smooth, and it was very soft to the touch, which made the other women exclaim in amazement. Previously, her appearance could be rated 90 points, but now it could barely be rated 95 points. She had also vaguely talked to Batman about it. Regardless of whether this attack went smoothly or not, she should return to Star City. Whether it was acting as Moira's mascot or her own college matters, they had all been put on the agenda. Batman obviously wouldn't say anything. It was a voluntary help. He was already grateful to be able to fight in Gotham for 2 months. Moreover, Thea had helped him a lot by getting rid of Talia, who he couldn't do anything about. 7 days later, the group charged into Arkham in the evening. Thea was initially surprised when she heard that they were going to attack at night. Batman still didn't dare to appear under the sun, but she had no reason to refuse. If he liked to go at night, then so be it. Batman and Thea had similar commanding methods. It wasn't convenient for him to show his face, so both of them controlled Director Gordon, who wasn't afraid of death. Since he didn't know what the enemy's secret weapon was, Batman brought all the equipment he could find. The police officers were also elites. Felicity had previously investigated and found that the original Arkham bandits had all died in the previous massacre. Despite the court's efforts to deal with them, the major underworld families did not give them any face. Ambushes and fights occurred from time to time. Considering that there were too many combat personnel in the room, the few of them discussed and only brought 50 veterans and 200 police officers to participate in the battle. Thea resisted the urge to complain about the number of participants. After all, she wasn't the one leading them. Although Master Bruce was proficient in Chinese and Cantonese, it was obvious that his folklore knowledge had not reached such a profound level. This time, Thea didn't dare to be careless. She didn't care whether it was an indoor battle or not. She went out fully armed. The entry into Arkham was unusually smooth. The fire that Miss Firefly had set before they retreated was still there. A third of the asylum was burnt down, and with the recent gang fights, the exterior was not taken care of properly. However, no one was careless. Batman did not enter with the main group. No one knew where he was hiding, pretending to be mysterious. Thea and her old partner, Miss Firefly, acted as long-range attackers. Although the two had a cold reputation, they had worked together many times and had some chemistry. But the tacit understanding soon disappeared. Batman used some kind of device to detect Mr. Freeze's existence, and commanded Firefly to fight him in his earpiece. Not long after, the two Talon members also jumped out to cause trouble. Batman then sent Barbara and Robin to deal with their old rivals. From time to time, groups of 2 or 3 gangsters would shoot at them. The whole team could only leave a few people to deal with them. As they went deeper into Arkham, the number of people by Gordon's side decreased. There were gunshots and explosions all around them. Was this a war of attrition? Thea also felt that this tactic was shameless. Even if they won, they would suffer heavy casualties. However, under such circumstances, they could only grit their teeth and fight their way in. Ah! With an angry roar, a guy with a large can on his back charged out. He aimed a punch at Gordon's head. However, he did not manage to land the punch. A bat dart pierced his arm from the side. The dart had a barbed design similar to Thea's. Once it was pierced, it would not loosen. The end of the dart was connected to a thin string. The other side of the string was tied to a pillar not far away. If he continued to charge forward, whether he could hit the old director or not, his arm would be broken. Bane! Batman stood on top. His deep voice was transmitted into their ears through a voice changer. Thea pouted when she saw this. You were at the back of the team, right? Don't think I didn't sense your presence. If you saw the enemy, you would have jumped onto the platform. Can't you guys fight properly? Isn't it tiring for you to run so high? Why did you have to act so mysterious? You must have used a Talon gun to get up there, right? Why did you jump down after receiving everyone's admiring gazes? Actually, Green Arrow also had this bad habit. Why couldn't she speak properly? Why does she have to go to the window frames, the roof, and other places that normal people would not go to? Why did she have to act like a master? As expected of the Ninja Master's son-in-law. Even though their appearances were different, they were still very similar when it came to acting. Leave him to me. You guys continue. There's still space under Arkham. Batman ordered through the headset and began to fight with Bane. Bane could tell that Batman did not use venom to stimulate his potential. Most likely, he was still traumatized by Thea. This time, he was purely using his martial arts skills to fight with Batman. Thea looked at him. He was indeed quite strong. If she fought him alone, she would not be able to take him down. However, if she used the magical version of left and right inter-combat, he would not be able to last more than a minute if two Thea attacked him together. Seeing how serious Batman was, Thea did not plan to gang up on him. Only by defeating Bane would he be able to become the invincible Batman again. This was a knot in his heart. He and Catwoman protected Gordon as they led the remaining people into the depths of Arkham. Catwoman quickly found the elevator that led underground. Catwoman, who was a master of unlocking, opened the elevator door in a few seconds. They did not encounter any enemies underground, nor did they find the secret weapon that Talia mentioned. Instead, they found a large number of Gotham citizens. There were too many of them. There were at least 1,000 of them. All of them looked dispirited and many of them had fainted. Gordon and Thea's team of less than 50 people could not transport them. The elevator could only transport a dozen people at a time. The fight above was like a battlefield. These people would be courting death if they went out. However, many of them were already in serious condition. There were people fainting on the ground every minute. Gordon, who lacked the quick thinking, automatically looked at Thea. His meaning was, Batman is busy outside. Please come up with an idea. Thea pondered for a while. Felicity, how many meters are we underground? Use the 3D model to see if there are other tunnels nearby. It was impossible to transport 1,000 people in one elevator. If they really transported them, half a year would pass. Chapter 123. There should be an underground passage, you guys. Look for it. Old Master Batman spoke in the earpiece. His voice was intermittent, making people suspect that he was doing some kind of pleasurable exercise. Of course, Old Master still had his integrity. He was panting because Bane was not easy to deal with. Half of the police officers were sent to look for the exit, and the rest made some simple stretchers to take care of those who had difficulty moving. Thea and Catwoman sat on the side and rested, watching the old director run around. They found the exit quickly, but it was not a broad road, but an abandoned sewer. The sewer was very wide. It seemed that Gotham used to be a city with a lot of rain. The sewer was tall and sturdy, but the dirty ground did not look like there were any signs of human activity recently. Looking at the dark and abandoned sewer, they were a little troubled. It was too dark. What if there was an ambush? It's high enough here. I'll ride the skateboard and scout. Thea, as the one with the highest combat power, could only take on this difficult task that no one knew about. Catwoman was a little embarrassed, but she was not as agile as Thea. She reminded her to be careful, and the two girls hugged gently. I'll go in first. Wait for my signal. Thea took some kindling and a torch, called out to them, and entered the sewer alone. After a while, when they could no longer see her, she activated her Een bloodmark. Clone technique. A lifelike shadow floated out of her body, and in less than a second, the shadow was completely materialized. It was dressed exactly like her, and looked at Thea vividly. It was a strange feeling. The same body, the same thoughts, but different perspectives. It was like looking into a mirror. The clone's equipment could also be changed, but the effect was really speechless. It was just an empty shell. Thea tried the sword that the clone carried, but it was not as sharp as a nail clipper. She cancelled all of them and passed the torch over. Thea's original body was still on the skateboard. She pointed into the distance and ordered, "Go scout." The doppelganger curled his lips in a very human-like manner, took the torch, and moved forward. That's a lot safer. Thea followed behind him slowly. She would never put herself in danger. If it wasn't for this secret technique, she would never do such a dangerous job. After walking for less than 10 minutes, Thea also sent a signal to the people behind her. Although the smell was bad, there was no danger. Selina, you stay at the back. I'll take the lead. The old director thought highly of the meticulous Catwoman. Although he was almost 60 years old, he still had the spirit of taking the lead. He ordered a few police officers to take the lead, and he himself followed closely into the abandoned waterway. Although Thea lit some fire sources to provide illumination along the way, there were too many people in the team. They were busy for 20 minutes before the whole team entered the waterway. Catwoman saw that there was no one around and quickly followed them. Most of the Gotham citizens who were captured were young and fit. Even though they had been imprisoned for a long time, they were still physically strong. Now, to escape for their lives, those who could still move were running at top speed. It was very quiet in the earpiece. The heroes were all silently dealing with the enemy. Catwoman was still a little dissatisfied with their speed. Just as she was about to ask how long it was before they reached the surface. Aya! Thea's voice came from the earpiece. The few of them were a little surprised and quickly asked what happened. Oh my god! I'll lure it away. Hurry up! Boom! Boom! Thea was halfway through her sentence when she was drowned out by all kinds of violent sounds. What happened? Catwoman, who was the most idle at the moment, quickly asked. However, no one answered her. What are you guys planning? Batman shouted angrily at Bane. Bane only laughed coldly and did not move at all. He took advantage of Batman's weakness and punched him a few more times. Batman had no choice but to focus on the enemy in front of him. The few of them were still trying to figure out what was going on when they heard a muffled sound not far away. Both the surface and underground were greatly shaken. Hiss. This time, it was Felicity's voice that came from the remote monitoring. Thea blew up the surface. It seems like she blew up the city's gas pipeline. Something is chasing after her. What could be chasing after her? This thought appeared in the minds of the few of them. It was no wonder that they were surprised. There were not many enemies in Gotham that could beat up the fully armed Thea. Oh my god! Felicity exclaimed. A 3-meter-tall humanoid monster is chasing after her. Even though she explained, it was no different from not explaining at all. The few of them still could not figure out what was going on. Phew! Phew! This guy is too strong. I'll lure it out of the city. You guys hurry up and come out. Thea finally caught her breath and briefly introduced the situation to the few of them. She was really caught off guard just now. She was in a daze 10 meters behind her doppelganger. Suddenly, she felt her doppelganger disappear. Then, she saw a 3-meter-tall humanoid monster with a green body appear in her line of sight. European and American sewers were generally built very high. Therefore, whether it was the 3-meter-tall enemy or the floating Thea, it was not too difficult. However, Thea wished that the sewers were built shorter and narrower. The enemy's muscles were as hard as iron. Its skin was gray, and its white hair was draped over its shoulders. Its scarlet eyes were staring at Thea. Solomon Grundy? Are you kidding me? Facing this giant zombie that had been dead for more than 100 years, Thea was completely dumbfounded. This guy shouldn't have come out now, right? It was said that it was as strong as Superman. Would he be able to defeat him? Of course not. Thea understood. This should be the secret weapon that Talia mentioned. The Court of Owls must have used some method to activate the giant zombie in advance and ambush them in the sewers. Are they trying to catch all of us in one fell swoop? Fortunately, she sent her doppelganger to scout ahead. Looking at its big fists, even if she was protected by a Kevlar combat suit, she would be done for. Thea did not want to fight this guy underground. She communicated with the magic of the black mist dagger. A black mist that could even absorb light enveloped the giant zombie. Since she did not know the effect of the black mist, Thea created another doppelganger and passed by it. The result was satisfactory. The giant zombie kept smashing around in the black mist and did not notice the doppelganger that slipped past it. Thea did not say anything and flew over the giant zombie's head. When she flew 30 meters away, she was also afraid that this guy would cause trouble for the large group behind her. Although she knew that it was invulnerable, she still wanted to use her speed advantage to pull it away so that the citizens would not be scared and pee their pants. Thea drew her bow and knocked an arrow. The target was too big. There was no need to aim. Thea shot at the center of the black mist. Chapter 124. The zombie seemed to have sensed the attack and rushed out of the black fog according to the direction of the arrow. Thea glanced at the zombie and saw that her arrow had fallen to the ground. Very good, very strong. It did not break through the zombie's defense at all. Without another word, she ran. However, she had underestimated the zombie's super strength. With its powerful strength, its speed was also unbelievably fast. It did not even slow down when it turned corners. With its huge body, it would probably catch up with Thea in a few seconds. Knowing that the environment here was limiting her ability, Thea controlled her doppelganger to run in the opposite direction to buy herself some time. As expected, the zombie was confused by this action. Its slow brain did not know which direction to go. Thea could not race with it in the tunnel. She had to return to the ground and fly up quickly. She looked around and took out a flame arrow, aiming it at the gas pipeline. After thinking about it, she felt that it was not safe. She threw a cloud of black fog in the zombie's path and created a new doppelganger. She handed her a gun and pointed it at the gas pipeline. Thea's original body quickly ran away. What happened next was what Felicity saw. The entire Arkham area was shaken by a huge earthquake. The original location of the pipeline was blown into a huge hole that was 20 meters deep and 30 meters wide. Thea successfully escaped into the sky, and the zombie Grundy was exposed to everyone's sight. Thea shot 2 more arrows with a frost arrow and a flame arrow, but the results were close to nothing. The zombie was not only invulnerable to weapons, it was also impervious to fire and water. Furthermore, it was extremely strong. Other than not being able to fly, it had almost no weaknesses. Thea did not dare to fly too high or too fast. She only wanted to pull the zombie out of the city. Whether she asked the swamp monsters for help or the remaining heroes to gang up on it, there would be room for her to use it. She also told Uncle Batman about the situation here. Batman and Old Gordon approved of her plan to pull the monster out of the city. However, when they heard that there was such a strong monster in Gotham, they did not believe it. Fortunately, Batman was knowledgeable, calm, and experienced. He reminded Thea to be careful and said that he would be there soon. Thea wasn't expecting much from him. Bane wasn't easy to deal with. He should be able to win, but if he wanted to kill him immediately, it would be a dream come true. It was better to rely on oneself than on others. Thea was afraid that this guy would go back and attack those that couldn't fly, so she had to slow down and shoot a few arrows from time to time. Although they couldn't break through his defense, it was better than doing nothing. Through continuous probing, Thea felt that Grundy was not as powerful as the legends made him out to be. Or rather, he was brainless. Although Grundy was a zombie, he was intelligent. However, the guy in front of her did not seem to be intelligent at all. He was dragged around the city by her clumsy provocations. One flew in the sky while the other ran on the ground. Soon, they were out of the city and arrived at the southern swamp that changed Thea's fate a few days ago. After circling the swamp twice, Thea didn't know if the swamp monster had left or if it felt that it couldn't defeat them and didn't dare to come out. It was as quiet as a wasteland. She had no choice but to continue circling Gotham. To the east was the sea. Thea tried to pull Grundy for another 10 minutes. This guy wasn't that stupid. After entering the sea, it ran back when it realized that it was seawater. She had no choice but to pull it to the west while calling for help from her friends. The first to arrive was the military helicopter from Heaven's Eye Society. They couldn't make a move in the city, but now that they were in the suburbs, they had nothing to worry about. 8 anti-tank missiles hit Grundy accurately. The smoke dispersed, and the zombie roared at the helicopter as if nothing had happened. The pilot of Heaven's Eye Society almost fainted. Now you know fear? I dragged this guy for a marathon. Do you think it was easy? Of course, Thea couldn't sit back and watch her allies die. She shot a few more ice arrows to attract the zombies' attention. At this time, Batman was burning with anxiety as he listened to the battle in the distance. However, Bane had learned his lesson this time. He didn't use venom to strengthen himself. Instead, he relied on his extraordinary skills to entangle Batman and try to keep him in place. There was a difference in skills between the two, but it wasn't big. Last time, Bane's sudden burst of strength had tricked Batman and led to the backbreaker incident. Therefore this time, Bruce was very conservative. 40% attack and 60% defense. Bane was also a little scared by the venom attack last time. He didn't dare to use his full strength. Anyway, the mission of the Owl Court was to hold Batman back. He didn't have to risk his life. Batman could guess what he was thinking. Thinking to himself, he raised his hand and threw out a smoke grenade. Bane reacted quickly. His first reaction was that his opponent was going to run away. How could he let that happen? He used the throwing technique that he used to fight in underground boxing and pounced on his opponent's waist. You were fooled. Batman's smoke bombs were all feints. He had already expected Bane's pounce. His left hand slammed forward, grabbed the breathing mask on Bane's face, and tore off the mask with force from his wrist. A dash, the severe pain made Bane run out of the smoke range in a few steps. His mask wasn't put on. It was surgically connected to the facial nerves. Now that it was violently removed, the nerves were seriously damaged and affected the operation of the brain. For a moment, he was muddle-headed. Batman saw that his face was covered in blood. His eyes were cloudy, and most of the skin around his mouth was torn. He knew that he had won. He pounced on him and gave him a good beating. He tied up his old enemy with his own special rope and hurriedly called Thea to ask her about the situation. Thea's situation was definitely not good at this time, but it wasn't that bad either. After all, the big zombie couldn't fly, and the power of the skateboard was almost endless. In response to Uncle Bat's question, she also said that they should think carefully before they come. This guy was invulnerable. If they wanted to take pictures as a souvenir, they should wait. At this time, her cooperation with the Heaven's Eye Society's military helicopter was not bad. Like a relay, they pulled the big zombie from the south to the west. Now, they were moving towards the north. In the communication channel, she could only say that they could still hold on. They should think of something quickly. After asking for her location, Batman didn't look at his comrades. He quickly got on his bat fighter. His equipment had a GPS. He had already found it a few days ago when Bane was in seclusion. The supersonic bat fighter quickly rushed to the battlefield. He was shocked when he saw Solomon Grundy for the first time. This thing didn't look like a laboratory product. It looked more like a natural product. How could there be such a thing near his own Gotham? He believed what Thea and the others said about it being invulnerable. However, in order to test it himself and obtain more data, he still fired a dense rain of bullets with the autocannon. Chapter 125. The Batfighter could be considered as the most advanced aircraft on Earth. It was fast, powerful, and easy to operate. In the future Battle of Dawn Justice, even Doomsday would not be able to catch up with it at full speed. Now, facing Grundy, the Batfighter could completely crush it in terms of speed. Even with Thea's extraordinary dynamic vision, she could only see a series of shadows flashing past. After that, the Batfighter opened fire rapidly, and a large number of bullets rained down on the zombie's head, eyes, heart, and other vital points. Solomon Grundy was completely defenseless against the Batfighter that appeared out of nowhere, and was howling in pain. The intense fire lasted for half a minute, and bullet shells fell to the ground like raindrops. Metal bullets, fire bullets, armor-piercing bullets, and all kinds of bullets rained down on the zombie. From time to time, there were some explosions and Grundy's screams that reached Thea's ears. She was indeed poor. Uncle Bruce had spent at least a few $1 million in 30 seconds. He was really a man. The scene was filled with smoke and flames. The few of them flew further away and carefully observed the Batfighter. Roar! The zombie staggered out of the smoke. It could be seen that the various bullets had caused some damage to it. Its right eye was blinded, and its arms and shoulders were damaged to varying degrees. There were many bullet holes on its pale skin, but there were no penetrating wounds. This meant that the bullets had been blocked by the layer of muscle. There was not a single drop of blood on the wound, and it was still squirming, trying to repair the bullet holes. It seems to be recovering, and it's not slow. Thea turned the detection function on her glasses to the maximum. She was a little disgusted by the white, dead flesh, but she still reminded him. Does your freezing have any effect on it? Batman naturally saw it too. He was also helpless. The recovery speed was too fast. In just a few seconds, the blinded eye had already grown back. His Batfighter was mostly used for traveling. It was not a fighter, so it did not have that many bullets. Part of it, but this guy is too strong. It can break free on its own. In order to let him see clearly, Sia quickly rushed up. When she was 200 meters away, she shot an arrow. The arrow pierced into the shoulder of the big zombie. The freezing effect was not bad, but it was quickly shaken off by the zombie. Batman studied it for a while. It seems to be able to suppress its recovery speed. What he said was pure nonsense. Any atomic structure could be frozen, and if it was frozen, there was no way to recover. Thea cursed silently but did not reply. Do you have any good ideas? Batman didn't say what he thought. Instead, he asked her from the perspective of a senior looking at a junior. The best way was to call a few especially fierce ones to fight it, but Master would definitely not do that. Laser weapons won't be very effective against it, and nuclear weapons can't be used easily. I think we should find a place to freeze it and bury it deep underground. To be honest, this idea was similar to what Bruce had in mind. His plan was to find a valley to lure it in, block both ends, and then pour high-speed cement inside. It was hard to say who was the wiser one, but it was all a trick to take advantage of the zombie's weakness of not being able to fly. Both of their plans were reasonable, but they also had shortcomings. Thea didn't have that many arrows, and there weren't enough valleys near Gotham. Just as he was considering which plan to use, Catwoman's voice sounded in the communication channel. Talon ran away, but we caught Mr. Freeze together. Can we use his freezing ability? Catwoman's voice was definitely not calm. It was easy to guess that they had spent a lot of effort to capture Mr. Freeze alive. This was good news. Thea's freezing arrow could only be used in emergencies, and it didn't last long. Magic still couldn't be seen in the light of day, and she didn't know how to summon wind, rain, fireballs, and icicles. In fact, that kind of magic had disappeared from the world. No matter how powerful a fireball was, it couldn't be more powerful than a missile. Magic was more reflected in its mysteriousness and indestructibility. Okay then, let's use the freezing plan. Batman also felt that it wouldn't be easy to find a deep hole in the mountains. If he accidentally ran into another superhero's territory, he would be embarrassed. Then, he discussed the specific measures with Thea in the communication channel. Needless to say, they found a lot of problems. First of all, Freeze's gun didn't have such a long range. Even though Catgirl and the others took off his helmet and put a dagger on his neck to threaten him, he couldn't do anything about it. The gun only had a maximum range of 50 meters. It wasn't designed for combat. To be honest, the distance was very close. Grundy's super strength was too great a threat. A random car sign or something like that would be very lethal. 50 meters was a distance that even Thea didn't dare to get close to, let alone Mr. Freeze, whose reaction speed was ridiculously slow because of his freezing ability. This was just asking him to die. Batman definitely wouldn't be so inhumane. Mr. Freeze wouldn't be stupid enough to rush up and kill himself. How do we limit its ability to move? This question was in the minds of the two. In theory, using the principle of heat expansion and cold contraction, Thea's frost arrows, flame arrows, and occasionally high-strength armor-piercing arrows could cause considerable damage to the big zombie. The atomic structure of the fluctuating temperature was very fragile. No matter how strong the big zombie was, it was still a carbon-based creature. It hadn't become some kind of conceptual existence. By the same logic, Batman could also cause damage to the big zombie if he didn't care about the cost. But the two billionaires both chose to think of another way, because this was a move to throw money into the water, and they wouldn't consider it until the last moment. I've caught Dr. Hugo from the mental hospital. He said that this zombie was fished out of the river because of the rising river. Its consciousness hasn't awakened. It's just a virtual personality that they forcibly instilled in it to control the body. Director Gordon timely shared the information he had collected. However, this information wasn't of much help to the current situation. Thea had long felt that Grundy wasn't as strong as the legend said. It looked silly. When she heard that the river was rising, she couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. Is this the hidden boss that I summoned by the rain? Thea listened to Director Gordon with an indifferent attitude. She had to admit that the Court of Owls had some tricks up their sleeves. They were also afraid that they couldn't control the big zombie. They combined the strengthening radiation technology with brainwashing to create a virtual personality to control the big zombie's body. However, this virtual personality was too weak. Or rather, Grundy's body was too strong. After controlling it for a short period of time, it caused a serious loss of control. They had no choice but to leave Arkham in a hurry, leaving the big pot to the heroes who followed closely behind to deal with it. This was a classic case of kill without Barry. Chapter 126. In the end, they decided that the two of them who could fight in the air would cripple the zombie, and Mr. Freeze would go up and spray it. Uncle, what if we don't succeed? Do you have a backup plan? Thea still felt that the idea was not solid enough. After all, the more detailed the plan, the lower the chance of success. Even the slightest mistake could cause the entire plan to collapse. Many villains had grand plans, but it was easy to destroy them. Batman was silent for a moment. I've called for backup. Don't worry. You're so arrogant and you're calling for backup? I'll believe you for now. Seeing that Thea was silent, Batman went through the entire plan in his mind. When he felt that there was no problem, he calmly gave the order. Selina, bring Mr. Freeze and come here as soon as possible. Thea, delay it for a few more minutes. I'll go find a suitable place. As he spoke, he started to check the information on the Batfighter, but he soon found that his password could not be used to access the satellite. Oh, I've checked it for you. There's a natural cliff in the northwest corner. If you lure it to the bottom and blow it up, it should be able to trap it for a while. Only Miss Felicity Smokey could find the information so quickly. Batman could only maintain his principle towards women, which was to pretend that he didn't know that she had hacked his satellite so blatantly. Thea had the urge to cover her face. Wasn't it a little too much to hack the satellite in front of the victim? She did not know that Felicity had kicked Bruce's access out without even looking at the name. Otherwise, it would be even more embarrassing. Batman did not have much to complain about this energetic girl, but with a strict attitude, he still told Thea not to let the zombie escape. He quickly went to the site to investigate. When he arrived, he found that the terrain was quite suitable. The cliff was about 10 meters high, and the joints were not very thick. He could easily break it with his autocannon. As long as he lured the zombie to the bottom of the cliff, he could make the whole mountain collapse. The falling rocks should be able to trap it. He operated the bat fighter and circled around the area, confirming that there were no signs of living creatures nearby. "Bruce, we have a situation here." Catwoman's voice was full of resentment, as if she was not doing her job well. Batman listened quietly and said to Thea, "Pull her over to me. I'll go get Selina." After he finished speaking, he left Thea a set of coordinates and rushed towards Gotham City. When he saw Mr. Freeze, he almost couldn't recognize him. Not only was he unkempt, there were also many slapping marks on his face. They were especially obvious on his pale face. A group of people stayed in the cold room. Only Catwoman was wearing a coat and holding a dagger to his neck. The rest of the people were also freezing. People who were frozen couldn't leave the cold environment. If he went out without a helmet, he would die. Catwoman didn't dare to let him wear a helmet. Both sides were troubled by the reality. However, this problem was too simple for Batman. He took out an unknown object from his belt and threw it into Mr. Freeze's mouth. "Plastic bomb. Put on your helmet and follow me." At the same time, he handed a remote control to Catwoman. "Keep an eye on him." Mr. Freeze touched his neck. He didn't dare to bet his life on the bomb. He reluctantly put on his helmet and boarded the bat fighter with the sci-fi-looking Freeze gun. When Catwoman boarded the plane, Barbara and Robin realized that there was no space on the plane. Batman also didn't want his apprentice to fight such a fierce zombie. Felicity was controlling the satellite anyway. He just needed to tell them to watch the live broadcast. They quickly rushed to the preparation site. Thea was still on the way. She had no choice. The zombie's speed was her weakness. She had to dodge the cars and trees it threw at her from time to time. Thea couldn't speed up at all. She could only fly slowly. Batman stopped the plane and went to the side of the cliff with the grappling gun. He set up a large circle of bombs and threw a remote control to Catwoman. He made eye contact and left the two at the scene. He flew to Thea alone. Mr. Freeze looked at the two remote controls in Catwoman's hands. His eyelids kept twitching. "Sister, you won't make a mistake later, right? Please don't make a mistake." At this time, Thea was still pulling the zombie's aggro. The Sky's Eye Society's military helicopter had returned early because of the lack of fuel. When she saw Batman coming to pick her up, she didn't say anything and just left everything to him. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't tired. She concentrated on moving from the center of the city to the south and circling around the city for a few hours. She attacked at night, but now it was dawn. Not to mention the consumption of arrows, she was not as focused as before. She was still in this state after the awakening of her bloodline. With the help of the sun rune, she could more or less absorb some sunlight to recover her strength. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to hold on. She flew quickly to the preparation site. This was the first time that Thea saw Mr. Freeze up close. Their eyes were definitely not friendly. Last time, her canister plan didn't cause much damage to Mr. Freeze, but all his armor and weapons were destroyed. This time, he was wearing an old model. He was not afraid of frostbite because of his special body, but he couldn't avoid the freezing effect. Ordinary people could defrost by heating, but he couldn't. He couldn't even touch it at room temperature. He could only defrost it in the freezer. What kind of environment was the freezer? The defrosting speed was as slow as a tortoise's. Luckily, he had a special body, so it took him 10 days to get out of the ice. His chest was stuck to his back, and he almost starved to death. Thea didn't know about his painful experience. She was just curious about his armor and freezing spear. She secretly thought that she must study his equipment carefully when he was locked up. Bang! The sound of air exploding from afar woke up the three people who were silent. "Is that a bird?" Catwoman, who was naturally sensitive to fish and birds, asked curiously. "That's an airplane." Mr. Freeze, the cryogenic scientist, despised Catwoman's ignorant and incompetent look. "That's Superman." Felicity, who was remotely controlling the Wayne family's satellite, immediately discovered the identity of the intruder. She screamed like a die-hard fan, her voice so loud that it made everyone's eardrums buzz. Thea was speechless. "That's enough. Can you not be so exaggerated?" The person who came was wearing blue tights with a Big's logo on his chest and an obvious red cape. It was obvious that he was Superman. His face was strong, and his expression was full of sunshine. He seemed to be the embodiment of positive energy. He stayed in the sky far away and didn't come down to greet them. Sia felt a lot more at ease now. Both of her legs were still there. Wouldn't that little zombie fall into the bowl with a handful of her hands? Thea's sharp spiritual power sensed a strong sense of peeping. She looked up at the sky reflexively. That sunny guy was looking at her with shining eyes. "Damn. I just said hello, and you're peeping at me. What is he looking at with his X-ray vision? This guy doesn't have any weird fetishes, right?" Thea subconsciously hugged her shoulders. Chapter 127. After thinking for a while, she understood that this guy was not using his superpower to look at girls. He must have noticed something strange about her and took a peek. Sia harumphed heavily. Her secret had been discovered, and there was no point in hiding anything when dealing with this group of cheaters. Her golden blood was so obvious that it would be difficult for her not to be discovered. Next time, her combat uniform had to be equipped with an X-ray protection function. There were too many people with X-ray vision these days. If she met a few perverted ones, she would be at a disadvantage. However, when she glanced at Superman in the sky, she saw that his face was full of uncertainty. In the end, he did not say anything. He just greeted Thea thoughtfully and did not say anything further. Could it be that this guy did not see it? Ancestor Merlin's bloodline was very powerful. It came with a shielding function? Thea did not know if her guess was right. She thought to herself that she should try to get some information out of Big Chow later. Thea's thoughts aside, in less than 5 minutes, the few of them saw a small black dot on the horizon gradually approaching. The bat fighter was afraid that the zombie could not catch up, so it did not dare to drive too fast. It could only fire a few shots and fly for a while before firing again. To be honest, this made Batman feel a little uncomfortable. His fighter could fire backwards, but it was really uncomfortable to shoot and stop like this. He also had to concentrate on avoiding the ground-to-air cars and electric poles thrown by the zombie. He could only admire Thea for being able to pull him along for a few hours. "You guys hide here well. I'll go take a look." No matter how agile the Batfighter was, it was not as agile as a skateboard. It was true that a small boat was easier to turn around. Thea could see Batman's dilemma. Seeing that Superman had no intention of going up, she could only go and help. However, when she was less than half the distance, an accident happened. Batman did not know if he was too relaxed or the angle of the fighter was too small. A boulder weighing more than 100 pounds was thrown out by Grundy like a sandbag. With a crack, it broke the left wing of the Batfighter in half. Looking at the Batfighter spinning and crashing into the ground, Thea hurriedly raised her speed, found a good landing spot, and shot 4 entanglement arrows into the ground. As it turned out, the anti-jump-off spider webs that Dr. Hoffman had designed to save people who had committed suicide were very useful. Under Superman's surprised gaze, the Batfighter was caught by 4 layers of dense spider webs. Thea hurriedly flew over and rescued Uncle Bruce, who had treated her quite well. At this time, Batman was wearing a black helmet, black armor, and black cloak. Even the skin on his face was black. He was purely embarrassed and angry. He had lost so much face in front of his old rival. In his heart, he secretly cursed himself to increase the bat sensitivity by 300% next time. Due to the failure of his mech, the original plan of digging deep into the ground and burying them had to come to a temporary halt. At least, these few people could not carry out the plan. Fortunately, the reinforcements who wanted to laugh at their old rivals finally decided to step in. Superman did not act rashly. Instead, he used a long-range attack to test his opponent's strength. 2 orange-red lasers shot out from his eyes and directly hit the big zombie. The big zombie, who had been attacked by the lasers, took 2 steps back. It let out a deafening roar at Superman. Ignoring the lasers on its chest, it picked up a huge rock on the ground and threw it out. Superman, who could move faster than the speed of sound, would definitely not be hit. He nimbly turned around in the air and dodged the rock. He focused on the outcome of his battle. The development of the situation was somewhat beyond his expectations. The heat rays that had always been effective did not cause much damage. At the same time, the enemy's strong self-healing ability also shocked him. Was this guy really an Earthling? This self-healing speed was almost on par with us aliens. Superman believed in the principle of not fighting blindly if he could kill, so he did not waste any time. He pulled his left hand back to his waist and raised his right fist high. Then, he rushed towards Grundy. The distance between the two of them instantly shortened as he flew at supersonic speed. Although Grundy had been brainwashed and could only move by instinct, his body's natural reaction was still there. Facing this punch, he did not retreat. Instead, he roared and raised his huge fist to meet it. Boom! There was a loud explosion at the place where the two of them collided. The huge force squeezed the air in all directions. The trees and rocks that were closer to the two of them were instantly smashed into powder by the powerful shockwave. Catwoman and Batman were experienced and had already found a place to hide. Thea also quickly increased her altitude to avoid the powerful shockwave. This kind of strength was too unreasonable. No wonder Batman did not like Superman. You have such great strength. You make us, who have worked so hard to train in martial arts, feel ashamed. No matter how good we train, it's useless. Thea thought that she was broad-minded, but this was the first time she had seen such an inhumane battle. She was so King jealous. This showed the importance of reincarnation. Fortunately, Superman was not omnipotent. His body was too strong, and his talent points were all added to his strength, speed, and vitality. His magic resistance was frighteningly low. As long as he had a little bit of success in his magic, he could use mind control to make this guy in the red cloak kneel down and surrender. With that in mind, she felt much better. In terms of life form, at least she was much stronger than her master, who was still racking his brains. Sia also relaxed and focused on this rare battle that Gotham would witness once in 100 years. Superman had already determined that the enemy's strength was about the same as his through his continuous probing. However, his opponent did not have the ability to fly. This seemed to be something he could make use of. He started to use his mobility to fly around Grundy. Although the big zombie tried his best to fight back, the effect was minimal. Superman's fists still landed on his head like raindrops. The battlefield of the two became bigger and bigger. Trees and mountains were destroyed by the aftermath of their attacks. The originally flat ground was also trampled by the angry Grundy. Thea flew high and focused on the battle. It could not be helped. She did not know which idiot taught Superman how to fight. He especially liked to grab the enemy and throw them out like bowling pins. After that, he would poke at the side and pose with a cold face. As one of the Grand Masters of Combat, Thea did not understand. Was there a need to do this? The damage from the fall was not as good as a punch. Throwing the enemy out was just giving up the early advantage. Grundy might have thought that it was fun after being thrown around a few times, so he started to play the throwing game with Superman. Superman would grab Grundy's neck and throw him out, and Grundy would grab Superman's cape and send him flying. The battlefield was getting bigger and bigger. Thea had already descended from the sky. It was more dangerous in the sky than on the ground. She hid beside Batman. Uncle was very experienced. He had already hidden in a shallow pit and watched the scene of the battle. This was probably the reason why so many people hated Superman. He did not pay attention to the environment. The originally beautiful place was now like a wasteland after a nuclear war. The next apocalyptic movie could be filmed here. Thea only had one word left for Dechow. Brainless. The battle lasted for 10 minutes. Although the big zombie was at an absolute disadvantage, Superman was still unable to take it down. This made him a little anxious. He saw an opening and went to the side of the zombie. He punched the back of its head. Chapter 128. The zombie had completely entered its instinctive combat mode. When it heard the gust of wind coming from the side, it reached out its pale hand and grabbed Superman's fist without hesitation. The corner of its mouth curled into a sinister smile. Superman struggled a few times, but he could not break free. What was going on? Their strength had always been about the same. This guy's strength has suddenly increased. He shouted at the few of them. In his impression, this big guy must have been created by some ambitious human scientist. Gotham and the rest should know something about it. However, Batman and the rest had always been running around. They had never fought so openly before. How would they know why? Fortunately, Thea vaguely remembered that the zombie had something that looked like withered ash. She carefully observed Grundy's surroundings. There was indeed a faint gray fog surrounding him. Ask Superman to stop hitting the enemy's head. Didn't Director Gordon say that the court created a new personality for it to control it? Look at the fog surrounding its body. I suspect that its strength has increased. This means that the old personality is about to awaken. Thea summarized her analysis to Batman. Fog? Why don't I see it? Old Master looked around for a long time but did not see any fog. This is bad. Am I the only one who can see it? At that moment, two little people appeared in her mind. The black Thea grabbed the white Thea and slapped her. Slap, slap, slap. Who told you to talk too much? Who told you to talk too much? Thea wiped the non-existent sweat from her forehead and did not say anything. Batman looked at her with confusion. Then let's use our method to imprison it. After that, he picked up a device and whispered a few words. Superman was stunned for a moment. He then changed the angle of his attack and started hitting Grundy's legs. Oh, you two even have a special communication channel. Thea thought to herself. Their friendship was really strange. They were fighting against each other and cooperating at the same time. Batman whispered a few more words. Then he turned to Thea and said, "Bring Selina and the rest up there and freeze it." Okay. Thea did not say anything else. She pulled Catwoman and Mr. Freeze and flew towards the demolition site. Superman had given up on the zombie's head after receiving their instructions. Instead, he attacked the zombie's legs and arms. The gray fog that was about to take shape seemed to be restrained by something. It retracted back into the body intermittently. In terms of strength, Superman had the upper hand again. Superman at full power was not just for show. With punches, kicks and heat rays, Grundy's limbs were broken like a sandbag. No matter how strong his recovery was, after such a long battle, the speed of his cell repair inevitably slowed down. Come over here. Tsao, who was radiating sunshine, waved at the people on the skateboard. Hurry up and get down. Catwoman ordered Mr. Freeze as she gestured with the remote control. Although he was very unwilling, Mr. Freeze had no choice but to jog and jump off the skateboard. Catwoman was not satisfied with his dragging speed. She even kicked him hard. When he got close to Grundy, he did not care about its roaring mouth. He aimed at the zombie's head and pulled the trigger. Visible frost quickly covered the zombie's skin. Mr. Freeze also knew that if the zombie escaped, the two flying in the sky would not be afraid. He would be the first unlucky one since he was the closest and the slowest. Superman also had frost breath. Perhaps in consideration of the overall situation of the cooperation between the two sides. He breathed out frost breath after Mr. Freeze. Seeing that they were so lively, Sia also shot a frost arrow in the spirit of killing people. Mr. Freeze was very motivated. Without Catwoman's urging, he spat out the frost gas. Occasionally, he could hear the zombies' muffled roars. He was so scared that he did not dare to relax. He kept changing his angle and froze the entire ground. He only stopped when the air in the pressurized barrel was completely exhausted. He took a few steps back and watched the development while panting. Batman was not idle at this time. He changed the Batfighter with half of its wing broken into a Batcopter. He pulled a square metal box from Wayne Enterprises that was 10 cubic meters in size. It was made of solid tungsten and could withstand a temperature of 3,000 degrees. He covered the frozen zombie with the box. After that, he poured a stream of high-speed cement into the gap in the box. Looking at Solomon Grundy gradually being buried and disappearing, Thea felt a little pity. As a beginner sorcerer, she felt a very strong power from the zombie. This power was not the power of the body, but something of a higher level. She could not explain it clearly. If she could study it, she believed that it would improve her ability. Unfortunately, now was not the right time. It was not good to do anything in front of Batman and Superman. Moreover, she was very weak. Even if she obtained the power from the zombie, it might cause more trouble due to her lack of control. You are? Sister Kara Danvers? Superman flew to Thea and asked in an uncertain tone. He always felt that this girl was very strange. His X-ray could not see through her at all. All kinds of abnormalities could not be seen by others, but he could see a lot of sunlight entering Thea's body every minute and every second. After coming to Earth for so many years, this was the first time he saw someone who could absorb sunlight. Because he could not see how he looked when he was basking in the sun, he was not sure if Thea's reaction was the standard reaction of Krypton. From the sunlight, he naturally associated it with his cousin Kara Danvers, whom he had not seen for many years. Batman, who was originally in a daze on the side, suddenly pricked up his ears. What do you mean? You and Superman are also relatives? Also, you are Talia's sister. Does this mean that Talia is also an alien? Just as Batman was thinking about whether to strangle his son when he went back, Thea's face turned green. No, absolutely not. Hero, you have the wrong person. How can you people randomly recognize relatives? You recognize relatives in front of Batman, and your reputation will drop by thousands in an instant. What's more, I am not. I'll leave first. Contact me if there's anything. Hearing her denial, Superman did not say anything. He coolly said goodbye to Batman and nodded at the others. With a standard takeoff motion, he broke through the sound barrier and disappeared from their sight. Batman's expression was normal as he chatted with Thea for a while. It was all nonsense about whether she was tired or not. Damn it. Thea was a little depressed. Her reputation must have dropped, but fortunately, it was not by much. She could only ask Catwoman to talk to him. If she could not do it alone, she could ask Talia to help. No matter what, she had to get her reputation back. What do we do next? Looking at the big zombie sealed in a 10 cubic meter box, everyone, including Mr. Freeze, heaved a sigh of relief. This unkillable and extremely strong guy was not easy to deal with. At least for Gotham, where victory was decided by intelligence, this big guy was too reckless. It could easily flip the table. Regardless of whether it was a hero or a villain, they could not accept it. Bury it on the spot. The old master's deep voice was transmitted to their ears through a voice changer. This kind of digging and burying had nothing to do with the heroes. Gordon, who was known as the #1 bug in Gotham and could not be killed, quickly appeared in their field of vision. He brought a lot of workers and digging equipment with him. After a brief introduction, he started digging on the spot. Batman meant that the deeper, the better. Of course, Sia didn't want it to be so troublesome, but she had no reason to object. In the end, the person in charge of the construction said that since they didn't lack money, they could only dig 10,000 meters at most. They wouldn't be able to go any further with the drill. Originally, Thea wanted to take a look at the situation, but when she heard that they had to dig 10,000 meters deep, she immediately fled. Could there even be oil? How long would it take? She used the excuse of going back to rest and flew back after saying goodbye to the others. Chapter 129. Catherine, come down and play with us. Mom, it's so dark here. Come play with me. UB*TCH. I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. In a gorgeous bedroom, a middle-aged woman with a face full of fear suddenly woke up from her sleep. No, don't come here. As the ticking sound of the clock echoed in the quiet room, she finally realized where she was. She looked at herself in the mirror, her face was ashen, and a trace of fear appeared between her brows from time to time. She rubbed her forehead. It's the third day and I've had nightmares. I can't live in this H*TTY place anymore. She angrily pressed the call button on the bedside table. Her loyal subordinates would escort her to another safe place. However, after waiting for a full 3 minutes, it was still quiet outside the door. She could only hear her own heavy breathing. She knew she was in trouble. She took out a pistol from the bedside table and looked around vigilantly. Hi, ma'am. Good evening. She suddenly heard a greeting. Without thinking, she shot at the window where the voice came from. The person was shot and fell to the ground, which made her sigh in relief. However, before she could calm down and think, she saw the same person appear at the window and greet her with the same tone. Hi, ma'am. Good evening. When she took down the third monster, her nerves were stretched to the limit. Although she was not a killer, she was trained in marksmanship. Her shots must have hit the other party, but it seemed that the other party was not hurt. Who was this person? Or was it something else? She tried to calm herself down and held the gun tightly, trying to comfort herself. When the monster appeared at the window for the 4th time, she did not shoot rashly. She wanted to know why the monster was looking for her. The monster covered in black fog came to the window and saw that she did not attack. Instead, she looked at him vigilantly. He knew he was one step closer to success. He jumped into the bedroom. "Don't come here." The middle-aged woman named Catherine pointed her gun at the black mist figure with trembling hands. No matter how hard she tried to cheer herself up, she was still scared out of her wits when she saw such an abnormal phenomenon. How could a normal person be shrouded in black mist? It was hard to say if this guy was even human. However, she was soon surrounded by an even greater fear. She did not have the heart to think about the black fog. The man in the black fog stretched out his smoky arm and snapped his fingers. "Give me the gun." Catherine felt that there was something wrong with the other party's IQ. "Why would I give you the gun for no reason?" However, even though his consciousness was very clear, his body couldn't help but walk to the black mist figure's side. His limbs were stiff as he handed the gun over. This abnormal scene almost scared her heart out of her chest. She felt as if a taut string in her head had snapped in an instant. Her rationality and logical thinking had all disappeared. She was finished. She had done too much evil, and it was finally the day when she could be free. 30% fear, 30% unwillingness, and a little disbelief. He trembled as he stood in front of the strange man in the black fog. The black fog monster that appeared here was naturally Gotham's good friend, Thea. After solving the Grundy incident, she also knew that her trip to Gotham had come to an end. Whether it was to help Moira in the election or to learn more knowledge, she needed to return to Star City. She spent the remaining few days thinking about how to deal with the Court of Owls. Rather than an organization, this organization was more like a loose club. The members were not fixed, but they had to be Gotham locals with sufficient social standing. The court had controlled Gotham City from afar for 200 years. Batman had destroyed some of their strongholds when he was young, but they miraculously avoided the disaster. This time, taking advantage of the chaos in Gotham, they started to return to the forefront. Their hiding methods were not very good. They were just hiding among the people. As Batman had many connections with the locals, he naturally could not find these enemies hiding in the upper echelons of society. Thea did not have this problem. She only needed a breakthrough. She did not need to find everyone. 3 days ago, she activated the nano-tracker in Talon's body. The woman she tracked was the court's liaison officer. For the next 3 days, Thea continuously used magic to invade the dreams of this middle-aged woman named Catherine. She used a large number of scary scenes to gradually break down her psychological defenses. Finally, she completed the preliminary control today. Of course, she would not say that she was thinking about the mind control spell to deal with a certain muscular man in a red cape. There must be a misunderstanding. Thea sighed. Although the casting process was bumpy, it was finally completed. If Merlin knew that his descendant took 3 nights to cast such a simple dream entry spell, he would definitely come out from the depths of the multiverse and throw a fireball at her face. This was the trouble of not having anyone to teach her. Thea knew that she was terrible, but this was her limit. She had to memorize the contents of the hidden map, the engraving method on the dagger, and various unreliable theories on the internet. She finally managed to cast the spell. In order to make the spell more effective, she even created 3 clones to send her to her death. When she thought that she could escape, she would kick her down, causing her to completely lose her mind. Of course, this was not a spell. It was the domain of modern psychology. In order to deal with this woman, Thea used all the means at her disposal. The clones only consumed her physical strength, but the dark mist consumed her meager magical power. In order to deepen the impression, she used it 4 times. She was almost at her limit. Thea reached out a hand and placed it on Catherine's forehead. She began to read the woman's memory under the woman's blank gaze. Actually, it was not appropriate to use the word reading to describe a person's memory. Memory was not a piece of paper, but a highly layered book. Although Sia had prepared herself mentally, she had to stop after reading the 3 layers of memory on the surface. There was too much content, and she needed to keep digesting it. She had to throw away the messy thoughts and memories of the middle-aged woman, and only keep the various matters about the court that she cared about. She let out a laugh that she thought was normal, but it was actually a terrifying sound after the voice changer. Thea sat on the side and took out her notebook to study how to read the woman's memory more efficiently. The liaison officer of the Court of Owls, Catherine Monroe, stood motionless in the same place. It was not that she was too scared to move, but that she had lost control of her body. After Thea violently read her memory, Her brain was more or less damaged. At this time, she was muddle-headed and could not differentiate between a dream and reality. Thea summed up the gains and losses and improved the reading method. Instead of the original reading method, she changed it from the original reading method to a point-based reading method. She did not want to waste any rubbish memories and increased the speed to avoid arousing suspicion if she left the camp for too long. This time, there was an accident at the beginning of the reading. Catherine's brain was filled with a lot of thoughts like, am I dreaming? When will I wake up? And so on. Interesting, this middle-aged woman's mind was not completely controlled by the spell. Instead, she thought that she was still in a dream. She buried the previous few conversations deep in her heart. This was a typical ostrich's mind. She originally planned to gather the people in the court to do one vote and then withdraw, but now it seemed that she could do more. Thea continued to probe deeper. This time, she did not linger on the memories, but plunged into the deepest part of the memory. Soon, she found a lot of consciousness at the bottom of the memory. These were the woman's most terrifying memories, which were buried deep in her heart after being washed away by time or through psychological treatment. Thea found the memory that she used to scare her. The whole memory in her mind was dark and had a slight trace of magic. This massive memory was trying its best to devour the terrifying memories around it. When it completely wiped out the surrounding memories, the middle-aged woman named Catherine would be frightened to death. Her breathing would be disordered and her heart would stop. Of course, Thea could not let her die. This woman's will was not strong, and she was in a high position. This was a weapon that she could use to control the court. Yes, she originally only wanted to sell the hammer, but now that she saw another possibility, she immediately changed her plan. She wanted to control the Court of Owls. Whether it was for the family's wealth or to set up Gotham, these so-called upper-class people were too useful to her. Furthermore, with their help, she might be able to find a way to further her magic training. Thea began to consciously modify the nightmare that she created. Because it was more or less tainted with her own magic, the memory did not reject her. Following the steady output of her magic, the old gray memory was replaced by a memory with magic. This new memory was modified by her into a very old-fashioned obedience contract. This middle-aged woman named Catherine Monroe would acknowledge Thea's orders from the bottom of her heart. Her daily conversations and actions would not be affected at all. In addition, the memory of magic had completely taken over the area of her terrifying memories. She would no longer have any feelings of fear. Perhaps this was a blessing in disguise. In the final stage, Thea left a small cluster of her mental strength in the deepest part of her heart. If Catherine was forcefully brainwashed, this cluster of mental strength would detonate her consciousness and turn her into an idiot. There were too many people with superpowers in this world. She had to be careful. Huff, huff. Thea withdrew from Catherine's consciousness. She had used up a lot of her mental strength. If it was not for the fact that her mental strength was far superior to that of an ordinary person, she would not have been able to withstand such a large consumption. After dispersing the black fog, she wanted to see the effect. She snapped her fingers. The woman named Catherine instantly regained control of her body. When she saw Thea's true face, the shock on her face slowly turned into excitement, and finally into ecstasy. Thea, when did you come? Let me get you something to eat. Do you have something for me to do? Tell me. Chapter 130. Catherine's enthusiasm was too much for Thea to handle. After experimenting with a few small commands, the results were pretty good. Thea didn't have the bad taste of making a master-servant contract. It wasn't nice to be called master by an old woman kneeling on the ground and calling her master. If it was a 16-year-old girl, she might have considered it. She chose the friendly contract, which had a lower psychological resistance. Modern people had a high resistance to master-servant contracts, especially in a place like America, where freedom was everywhere. If she forced herself to accept it, the psychological trauma would be projected into her daily life, and she would be exposed. This wouldn't be beneficial to her future plans. The friendly contract would preserve all her thinking abilities. Other than ordering her to die, all other orders would be carried out. Even if it was a special person who was good at hypnosis, they wouldn't be able to discover the problem without a large-scale memory search. Over the next 2 days, Sia repeated the same trick and brainwashed another important figure in the Owl Court. It was the current patriarch of the Falcone family, the head of the city's criminal family, Luigi Falcone. His brother, Mario Falcone, died at the hands of Gordon Sr. many years ago. Before he took over the family's affairs, he was secretly delighted. Every day, he would clamor for Gordon Sr. to pay with blood. He had repeated these words over and over for 20 years, to the point that even he himself believed it. Catherine used the excuse of discussing future matters to bring Luigi to her residence. Thea couldn't be bothered to enter the dream and slowly corrupt him. She directly hit the back of his neck and knocked him out. She took her time to do it. Thea's preparation didn't go to waste. Luigi, who had been in the underworld for many years, had a stronger psychological resistance than Catherine. However, after 2 days of hard work, she finally took in the representative of the Black family in the court. Looking at the bald old man with age spots all over his face lowering his head in front of her, Thea felt a sense of accomplishment. Catherine Monroe represented the old nobility of Gotham and was the founder of the city. She could determine the direction of the court to a certain extent. Luigi Falcone was the godfather of the underworld in the city. He had great influence over the other major crime families. The two of them represented the radical and conservative factions in the court. Thea did not intend for them to work together. She wanted to maintain the status quo. As long as they could continue to transfuse blood to her, they would have accomplished their mission. Both of them reported directly to Thea. Even if one of them betrayed her, the other had the ability to hold them back and wait for further orders. From now on, I need you to transfer 3% of the court's operating funds to my secret account every month. She looked at her two subordinates who didn't like each other and continued. Also, instruct the families in the court to collect all books related to the mystical realm. The older the better. I want the original. The monthly percentage did not seem large, but it was actually an astronomical figure. This was the contribution of dozens of families. It was too important for the cash-strapped Thea. It was the same for books. Asking Thea to collect them would cost her her life. Many of these families had been passed down for hundreds of years. There might be notes and books from their predecessors that had been passed down to the present day. Rather than letting them gather dust in their hands, it was better to let her use them. Finally, she asked for various human experiment data and reports on the resurrection of the dead. Amazing! Thea flipped through the reports. She was impressed by the results of the court's research. They had started the research on the resurrection of the dead 50 years ago. Needless to say, their initial goal was the instigation of these old nobles who were afraid of death. But it was only 20 years ago that they began to show results. They used a few animal cells with strong self-healing abilities to create a brand new substance. Then, they used the principle of nuclear radiation to implant it into the DNA sequence of the dead. Then, they used electric shock, fire, and freezing to activate the self-healing ability of the cells and resurrected the dead. But this seemingly good experiment result was not optimistic in actual clinical practice. Several court leaders who had reached the end of their lifespans had accepted this experiment, but without exception, they all failed. Through constant comparison, the conclusion was that natural deaths were ineffective, and only unnatural deaths had a certain effect. 10% success rate? Thea looked at the final conclusion and laughed a little. How much money had been spent in the past 50 years? A sea of resources had been thrown into the water in exchange for a 10% success rate? Throwing this unreliable document aside, Thea picked up a small bottle and looked at 3 drops of almost transparent grayish-white liquid. The blood of Solomon Grundy's heart. These drops of blood were a pleasant surprise for Thea. She did not expect that the court was also thinking about the big zombie. They found the big zombie that floated out of the water. On the one hand, they simulated control, and on the other hand, they spent 15 days without rest to extract these 3 drops of almost transparent blood from the big zombie's heart. For ordinary people, this blood was very strange and beyond common sense. But for Thea, who walked the path of the supernatural, it could only be described as shocking. The power in these drops of blood was too strong. Just by sensing it a little, Thea almost got hurt. Gray, decayed, and had a strong corrosive power. This was definitely not the power of justice. Thea was a little relieved that she could not absorb this thing. Her instincts told her that if she absorbed it, she would turn into a zombie at the very least, or die at the very least. This was not a power that a living person should have. But not absorbing it did not mean that she had to return it to the court. This thing was still useful to her. Living people could not use it, but dead objects could still be used. Thea looked at the sword of Azrael in her hand. This shop sword was brought into the trial, which meant that it was extraordinary. With the analysis of the dagger, Thea had determined that this sword was originally forged as a magical weapon, But for some reason, this crucial step was not completed. The runes were not carved, and the magic circuit was not written. Originally, this sword could only be a half-finished product, but now it seemed that she could complete the last step with Grundy's blood. But this required a lot of time and knowledge. Thea's time in Gotham was getting shorter and shorter, so the matter of magical weapons could only be left for the future. She ordered her subordinates to hide as much as possible. If Batman wanted to run for the position of chief of the Gotham Police Station, she would fully support him and drag him to all kinds of fundraising dinners in the upper class. The court's main task was to take over the black areas in the city, whether it was the territory of the Penguins or the Scarecrows. Of course, the court could not appoint the person in charge. The court still maintained its usual style of remote control, neither too close nor too far away. At the same time, Thea thought about it and did not stop them from persisting with the resurrection experiment. After so many years of research, there was finally some progress so they could continue with their research. Chapter 131. After successfully dealing with Arkham and rescuing a large number of citizens, Batman's recent days were generally quite pleasant. Catwoman's jealousy was broken by old Master Bruce's persistent pestering, and the two of them returned to their former intimacy. As Gotham's security improved, the training of the two disciples was gradually scheduled. Once Batman became serious, Barbara would find it difficult to handle. She had to go to school during the day, and form a team to fight criminals at night. The rest of her time was spent on training, and she didn't even have time to do the things she loved with Robin. However, every time she wanted to give up, she would see Thea's smile at the right time. Her unyielding personality made her grit her teeth and persevere. Thea would train with them in her spare time while building the mechanical arm. With her own fighting ability, she could even hold on for a long time against Batman. Fighting Barbara and Robin was even easier. Even if the two of them came at her together, she would be able to take them down with some effort. Batman had been thinking about Thea's suggestion to make him a bureau chief. He had repeatedly considered it and sought the opinions of a few parties. Among them, his old butler Fu had a decisive effect on his decision. According to Fu's opinion, being a bureau chief sounded much better than being a playboy. Whether it was considering the Wayne family's reputation or his own safety, it was a good idea. He had watched Bruce grow up, and he didn't want him to fight criminals day and night. Especially after the broken back incident, the 80-year-old butler was scared out of his wits. Even though he had never met Thea, he had a good impression of Thea, and would often persuade Bruce to become a bureau chief. The old butler was like half a father to Batman, and his reputation was constantly at the level of worship. Listening to his repeated persuasion, he couldn't help but be moved. Old Commissioner Gordon also supported this idea. He was nearing his 60s, and the Gotham Police Department situation was not good, but it was not too bad either. If Bruce could take over his position, he would be able to rest in peace even if he died immediately. With the two most important elders in his life supporting this plan, he really could not think of a reason to reject it. However, out of caution, he did not go straight to the point. Instead, he tried to submit the application for the position of president of the Gotham Police Officers Guild. There were all kinds of unions in America, such as the Actors Guild and the Directors Guild. There were all kinds of unions that one could think of. The police union was purely a decoration, and no one had paid attention to it for so many years. Master Bruce had originally planned to test the waters and wait for a few days to see the reactions of various sectors. However, the next day, the overwhelming reports from various media outlets scared him to death. As the head of the police department, Chief Gordon secretly opened the back door and released some information among the police. Then, Thea remotely controlled the members of the Owl Court and used her connections to help him. Prodigal son joins Gotham Police Force. This was the front page of the Gotham Times. Tomorrow's star prepares to join the police force. Looks like a clear stream in the police force. The Gotham Evening News also did a full-page report. The Gotham Morning News even did a special segment. At 6 in the morning, they stopped Lucius Fox, who was about to go to work. The black man did not know what was going on. He was confused by all the questions and could only choose to praise Bruce. In an instant, Bruce Wayne's image changed from a playboy to Gotham's savior. After these reports were broadcasted, the old man was stunned. Do I have such a high reputation? Could it be an enemy's trick? However, when he saw Lucius talking on the screen, it did not seem like it. He then asked for Catwoman's opinion. Go, why not? Catwoman also had some expectations for him to become the bureau chief. Those damn cops had caught her for 20 years. Now that she had become the bureau chief's wife, wouldn't they be pissed to death? Even Robin and Barbara agreed. Robin was determined to be a police officer. Now that his teacher had entered the police force, it was definitely a good thing. Barbara had been trained too harshly by him. If he could let her rest for a few days, she would want him to be the Secretary General of the United Nations, much less the bureau chief. Bruce asked around and found that everyone in his circle was in favor of him becoming the bureau chief. No one was against it. Only then did he, who was in the late stages of paranoia, completely relax. If there was no conspiracy, then he would go. After confirming that he had indeed submitted the application to the city government for the position of bureau chief, Thea heaved a sigh of relief. No matter how well the Owl Court hid, there would always be traces. Now that she had found something for Batman, whose IQ was off the charts, to do, it would be much easier for her to transfer resources from Gotham. She instructed Catherine and Lewis to mobilize all kinds of police, political, and business resources to be sure to delay Batman so that he would not pay attention to the various capital flows in the city. From officially entering the eyes of the public to sitting on the bureau chief's throne, it was estimated that she could divert his attention for at least 2 years. During this period, Thea could get a steady stream of materials from Gotham and Wayne Enterprises. Yes, dozens of families in the Owl Court actually controlled Wayne Enterprises. If you add in the shares in Thea's hands, there would be no friends. But these controlled shares could not be seen. The Owl Court had been resisting Bruce's entry into the board of directors for more than 20 years, but both sides were still restrained. This opposition was only maintained at the normal business level. Thea was of course not interested in controlling Wayne Enterprises. Her goal was to become stronger. Although it could not be seen, Wayne Enterprises' various technologies and advanced equipment were at her disposal. This greatly improved her technical reserves and cleared many obstacles for the production of the Iron Man armor. Realizing that her trip to Gotham was coming to an end, Thea began to say goodbye to everyone. Outside the pavilion by the old road, the grass was green and the sky was green. That was impossible. They were all modern people. They could talk and video call. What was there to say goodbye to? Finally, on the tarmac of Wayne Enterprises, Batman's group of 4 and director Gordon held a special farewell party for the Star City duo. Felicity and Felicity's relationship had warmed up so quickly that Sia found it unbelievable. The two of them ran to a corner and took out their phones to do some shady business. Although I have said it many times, I still want to say thank you. It is my honor to meet you. Bruce, who had been busy for the past 2 days, came to see them off. It is also my honor to meet you. Although she did not agree with his way of doing things, Batman's shining personality was still admirable. The two shook hands, and Thea talked with Director Gordon for a while. To be honest, the two had more dealings with each other than the others. Thea could only express admiration for this very charming old man. She said a few words to Barbara and Robin. It was not a life and death parting. They could still meet in the future. Everyone take care. The two got into the helicopter, and Thea waved to them from the cockpit. The helicopter slowly rose to the sky and flew in the direction of Star City. Chapter 132. When Thea returned to Star City, she was dragged away by Moira, who had been anxiously waiting for her for 3 days. Moira had entered the preparation stage for the election. In order to win the approval of the voters, she had to play the role of a low-income person, or rather, she could not be a billionaire. She had to transfer the assets under her name and donate them to society. Only a fool would do that. The general rule of the game was to hand over the inheritance to the children. Although it was a bit like taking off one's pants to fart, almost all the candidates appeared to be poor. Each of them talked about how miserable they were in the TV debate. There were even some who moved from the rich district to the slums in order to gain the name of being close to the people. Moira's bottom line was not that low. She did not intend to give up her family's mansion to live in a low-rent house. However, the family's assets still had to be transferred. It was not impossible for a billionaire to directly participate in the election, but it would be very unusual. Her election style leaned towards the steady and practical side, and she did not need those eye-catching measures. Before Thea understood what was going on, she was surrounded by nearly 50 lawyers and signed documents for the whole morning. If it were not for the fear of shocking the world, she would have let her doppelganger out to sign the documents. There were too many documents. For the whole morning, she had written her name at least 1,000 times, and her wrist was sore. Although the Quinn family's assets were nominally under her name, In fact, she was still underage. The rules were different in the United States. The average age of adulthood was 18 years old. In Star City, it was less, and the age limit was 17 years old. She was still 1 year away. Before she became an adult, her guardian still controlled all her economic lifelines. Her guardian was naturally Moira. So, after going around in a circle, her mother was still firmly in control of everything and was not affected at all. In any case, it was the first step in a long journey. She was just inheriting the company and it was already so complicated. Those who inherited the throne in ancient times must be even more uneasy. She had to say that it was a wonderful move to take over the Owl Court. Whether it was funds, connections, or subordinates, she had everything. If she waited for the Quinn group to fall on her head, she did not know how long she would have to wait. After a busy morning, Thea officially took office in the afternoon. Of course, she wasn't going to work in the group. The black uncle, Walter Still, managed the group well. She didn't need to cause any trouble at all. She just needed to be on the board of directors. As Moira's only living child, she had to go and rally support for her mother's campaign. To put it bluntly, she had to act as a mascot on the spot to prove how successful Moira's mother's education was. She had to do her best to attract women's votes. At this time, Thea was wearing a light red dress. Even though she had told the stylist that she was going to a low-income community to promote and that she shouldn't wear too revealing clothes, the bearded stylist still found her a dress that exposed a large part of her back. When she walked out of the changing room, everyone, including Moira, was shocked by her white skin. Thea had eaten the green object that was suspected to be the devil's fruit during her last few days in Gotham. Perhaps it was because of the earth attribute, the effect of the transformation was quite mild. There was no major bleeding or pain. It only caused Thea's stomach to be uncomfortable for a few days before the whole process was completed. When she carefully checked the differences in her body, she found that the transformation did not strengthen her bloodline. There was no extra golden blood in her heart. Instead, her lungs had a qualitative leap. Her intuition told her that her hematopoietic function had been greatly strengthened. If she could automatically evolve a drop of golden blood in a year in the past, now the time had been shortened to 3 months. At the same time, her resistance to toxins had also been strengthened. From the outside, her whole body looked more beautiful and the lines were softer. The muscles that had gradually become visible during her training were also hidden. Her skin was so bright that even if she didn't deliberately dress up, she would still make the women around her feel sad. As a mother, Moira was not worried that her daughter would steal the limelight. She was only worried that her daughter would become more outstanding, and no one would be worthy of her. Previously, Thea had sent a lot of photos to Moira in Gotham. In fact, they were all taken at Bruce's private beach. Felicity had forcibly photoshopped them into Malibu Beach. At first, Moira just casually flipped through the photos, but as she looked, she found a familiar figure. Bruce Wayne. As the biggest playboy in the United States, she had naturally seen him before. Seeing that the two obviously knew each other in the photos, Moira couldn't help but wonder if her daughter had been deceived. Was it because she had been too strict with her daughter that she had been blinded by the playboy who spent a lot of money? There were a lot of thoughts, but in the end, the only thought left was that the two of them were actually quite compatible. Bruce was a little older, but he was rich. As long as they got a marriage certificate, they could get a divorce. To be honest, in the whole of Europe and America, there were not many people who could match Thea in terms of social status. Those who were rich were older, and those who were not worthy of her. Moira was worried sick for her daughter. She secretly ordered her subordinates to investigate all the habits of Master Bruce in Gotham. However, Master's concealment skills were maxed out. Even with so many villains, they still could not find him, let alone Moira's subordinates. In addition, Gotham was in a state of chaos. In the end, they did not find anything. Moira could only keep this matter in mind and wait for the right time to talk to her daughter. Thea did not know that her photos had been exposed. She was standing behind Moira with a smile on her face, watching her mother shake hands with the housewives who came after hearing the news. Her mind had already fallen to the necklace she was wearing. This sky blue necklace was given to him by Malcolm. After returning from Star City, he unintentionally discovered that the inscriptions on the inside of the necklace were very interesting. Just like the Dark Mist dagger, this necklace was a magical equipment. There were only 4 inscriptions on the dagger, and they were very basic. However, there were 15 inscriptions on the necklace. The interpretation and recognition of various runes made the necklace nearly 10 times more difficult to decipher than the dagger. It was obvious that this necklace was passed down from old Ma's ancestors. It was only in modern times that no one had awakened the bloodline, so it was reduced to the level of an ordinary accessory. Thea, who hated her lack of means to control the enemy, was overjoyed. However, after seeing 2 words, she was a little dumbfounded. Even though Thea had been learning this magical language recently, she had always lacked a basic reading book. There were many words that she had to guess. If she guessed correctly, it would be fine. If she guessed wrong, it would be a pure waste of time. The whole deciphering process was as slow as a snail. After taking a few deep breaths, she knew that she was a little impatient. She slowly adjusted her state of mind. Moira was talking about the rights of women and children on the stage. The audience applauded from time to time. It was too noisy here. Thea pretended to clap her hands a few times. She planned to go back and study it. For now, it was better to be a mascot. Chapter 133. Reality proved that it was not easy to put on a show. Thea pretended to be a good girl for 3 days and pondered over the inscriptions on the necklace every day. However, her expressionless face was interpreted by the media, and after 3 days, she found that all kinds of negative reports about her were overwhelming. Miss Quinn is extremely arrogant. Her elementary school classmate told her past. Thea Quinn hangs around the bar and gets drunk all night. There were a lot of reports, and Moira comforted her that she did not have to take it to heart. These were all the tactics of her opponents. Sia also understood that she was standing there as a target. In this world, who wouldn't talk about others behind their backs? The European and American media were all like this. If they wanted to say something, they could say it. She wouldn't lose anything. Compared to Master Bruce, who worked hard for Gotham at night and was scolded like dog shit during the day, she was considered mild. However, even if the mother and daughter did not care, the hot-blooded youths in the campaign team still cared about this resume. On this day, they publicly pushed out a fake elite who was good at talking and prepared to persuade Miss Quinn that, although he had repeated his lines 10 times, when the young talent faced Thea, he could not help but feel a little nervous. She personally organized 2 Gotham Grand armed melee and participated in it once. This was not a joke because she directly killed hundreds of people and injured thousands of people. She affected the future of countless families and their fates. At this time, Thea's temperament leaned towards the cold and ethereal kind. Coupled with the deep transformation of her bloodline, she looked even more oppressive. She was silently calculating the 7th inscription on the necklace. This inscription seemed to connect the previous and the following. If she could understand it thoroughly, it would be of great help to her next interpretation. Now that her thoughts were interrupted by the young man, she was not angry, but more or less depressed. She glanced at him with bright eyes and did not say anything. She signaled him to say what he wanted to say. If not, he should get lost. The young talent almost fell to the ground under her gaze. Was this the gaze of a human? It was too scary. However, when he thought of his mission and how he had studied hard for so many years just to stand out, he stuttered, "Our election team. Hope that you can be more approachable and not be so cold." Without waiting for Thea's response, he forced a smile and ran away. Thea's clenched fists relaxed when she realized that he wasn't here to flirt with her. Ever since she had awakened her bloodline and was brought to the front desk by Moira, they had been sending her flowers every day and using all sorts of lame excuses to talk to her. They had annoyed her to no end. She could use her submachine gun to deal with the bad guys in Gotham, but it was definitely inappropriate to use force against these flies. After thinking about it, he decided to endure for a few more days. After Moira finished her speech in the city, he would be able to rest. As for the so-called cold face of the young man, she couldn't do anything about it. She was completely immersed in the study of inscriptions. Although science couldn't analyze it at present, Thea thought it was also a kind of science. It was really impossible to make her laugh while thinking about it. This group of young people in the election office took it too seriously. In fact, this was all a process that had already been arranged by the higher-ups. In the city council, how many members did Old Ma control and how many did Moira control? Although the Owl Court claimed to not leave Gotham, it could always influence some people. Finally, with the participation of the Heaven's Eye Society, almost 100% of the people agreed. How could it not be elected? The opinions of the voters stopped at the level of opinions. Once the election results came out, it would be whoever was elected. Things like calling a deer a horse happened every day in reality. Shaking her head, she collected her messy thoughts and continued to concentrate on her research. Thea, you can take the car back yourself. I have to attend a banquet later. She finally had another day. Before getting into the car, Moira knew that she didn't like all kinds of social activities, so she gave her a day off and let her have fun. Thea was also disgusted with eating with those big-bellied successful people. They were a group of vermin with so much fat that even her arrows couldn't penetrate them. Knowing that she didn't have to suffer, she happily hugged her mother. She declined the bodyguards following. This kind of bodyguard looked tall and strong, but she could beat 10 of them with her bare hands. If she carried a weapon and used all her magic power, no matter how many people came, they would all die. Before getting into the car, she looked around and found that there was no one under the car. Then she turned on the engine and drove away. She couldn't help but be careful. It was not an assassination or anything. The main thing was that the tabloids were too crazy. 2 days ago, when Thea was about to get out of the car, she found a man in black lying under her car in an instant. At first, she thought it was a scammer. In fact, she found out that it was a paparazzi from a gossip magazine. He didn't want to assassinate anyone. He just wanted to take pictures of the scenery under Thea's skirt when she got out of the car. Thea, who knew the truth, was so angry that her face turned pale. It was not appropriate to kill him directly. She could only beat him up and teach him a lesson. For a tabloid with a total of 2 or 3 employees, no matter how powerful Malcolm was, no matter how many claws the Court of Owls had, it was useless. He was not afraid of death at all. People were not afraid of death, but they were willing to die for the sake of sales. Encountering such a person, Thea had no choice but to be more careful. Driving alone on the streets of Star City, she couldn't think of who to look for a while. Felicity went back to her hometown. Of course, she didn't go back to her hometown to get married. It was said that she went to accompany her mother to celebrate Hanukkah. She didn't have many friends in Star City. Sigh, she should go and chat with her future sister-in-law Laurel. Laurel was very happy that Thea came to find her. After a simple tidying up, the 2 women went to eat nearby. Although the 2 women were not close friends, they had known each other since childhood and were very familiar with each other. After a few words, they entered the stage of complaining to each other. Thea finished talking about her own troubles. Of course, she only talked about the part that could be said. If she talked about how she killed 7 people in and out of Gotham, it would drive Laurel crazy. When the topic turned to Laurel, Thea knew that she had not had a good time in the past 2 months. Thanks to the large number of jobs provided by Moira, the security in the slums had achieved a rare peace. Several popular troublemakers had also been transferred to other cities. With no one taking the lead and no one causing trouble, coupled with the fact that everyone was busy with their new jobs, no one came to Laurel's law firm to file a lawsuit. Although this was good news for Laurel, who had a strong sense of justice, the law firm was declining visibly. 3 out of the original 8 partners had already left, and the remaining few were looking for other ways. Originally, the 8 of them had shared the daily expenses, but now the remaining partners had to bear the burden. Laurel's meager assets were almost depleted. Tommy, who used to be rich, had been appearing and disappearing mysteriously recently. Laurel sometimes wondered if he had found another woman. Chapter 134. Today, Laurel was wearing a beige business suit, revealing a pair of long legs and a pair of high heels. When she thought of Tommy, her whole temperament immediately became very melancholy. She picked up the wine that the waiter had just handed her and took a big gulp. Is Tommy still learning martial arts from old Ma? But he couldn't refuse to see his girlfriend, right? Although she was a little suspicious, Thea still wanted to know the truth. Tommy, I haven't contacted you recently? Laurel waved her hand. When Thea thought that Tommy had disappeared, she said, just by phone, but we haven't seen each other in a long time. Then she clasped her legs under the table, her face dark red. Thea's perception had evolved into psychic power, so she was more sensitive to changes in the surrounding environment. Laurel's sudden heartbeat didn't escape her notice, but it was obviously not a sign of poisoning, but a sign of yearning. She glanced at Laurel's big breasts, which were the largest she had ever seen. She estimated that they were at least D-class. How could she comfort her when she was so dissatisfied? Should she go home and find a cucumber? That would be the end of their friendship. Laurel was unconsciously tempting the underage girl. Under the influence of alcohol, She told Thea a few interesting things about her relationship with Tommy. When a man and a woman encountered something interesting, they would definitely go home and do something more interesting. She inevitably told Thea about how long Tommy lasted and what positions he liked. Thea didn't feel awkward at all. She had always been calm about her mother finding a boyfriend, so it wasn't a big deal to have a brother who was related by blood. She just felt that Tommy didn't have enough energy to deal with Laurel and was very passive. What about Oliver? What was it like when you were with him? Thea asked with bright eyes. Oliver. Laurel put her hands together as if she was reminiscing. She couldn't help but smile. He was very gentle and strong. It was always fun to be with him. Thea rolled her eyes. See, this was why Oliver had sex with all the women in the series except for her, who was his biological sister. The problem was that he was strong. He was really good at it. And always fun meant that he had a lot of tricks and could adapt to different situations. Thea glanced at Laurel again. It was no wonder that the two of them were a perfect match. No wonder Laurel began to waver as soon as Oliver returned to the city. Tommy's body was not as good as Oliver's. At this time, Thea had already planned to finish the election phase and rush to Purgatory Island. No matter what Oliver thought, at least she would give him a chance to go home. At the same time, she could also save Yao Fei's daughter, Shadow Yao Dong. She was one of the few girls in the movie who had an indescribable national temperament. Thea had a good impression of her and was prepared to change the ending of her tragic death. In addition, Thea inadvertently glanced at Laurel. Her sister, Sarah Lance, should also be on the island. If there were no accidents, they would all be pulled back. Thea, do you have a boyfriend? Have you tried? Laurel was obviously a little drunk. She suddenly felt that it was a little unfair for her to be the only one saying it. You have to say something. If you don't do well, I can teach you. She unconsciously sounded like a senior imparting her experience to a junior. Sigh, Thea instantly understood what she meant and covered her face a little. I can scare you to death when I entertain myself. Do you think my doppelganger technique is a joke? The same body, the same thoughts, combined with the pleasure from different perspectives, the sensory stimulation is double. Let me tell you, I'm afraid of myself when I'm dirty. Although it was originally just to test the limits of the technique, the subsequent development was not very harmonious. Thea did not tell anyone this secret. She was afraid that Ancestor Merlin would find out and throw a fireball at her from a higher dimension. You're just a piston friction on the physical level. I've already entered the magic era. As long as my magic power is further strengthened in the future, 2 or even 3 doppelgangers will not be a problem. Laurel can't fight Sarah and Oliver plus Tommy, right? Thea felt that her thoughts were unrestrained and had almost run to Mars. She quickly calmed herself down. I'm definitely not that dirty. This is the after effect of blood purification. Yes, that's right. She was about to make up a fake boyfriend to deal with Laurel. Bang! Bang! The familiar sound of an M1911 pistol reached her ears. Thea instantly picked up the fork on the table, ready to throw it out if there was any danger. From today onwards, this bar will be under the protection of the Botner family. A burly man with a full beard walked into the bar with 2 subordinates carrying rifles. Seeing that his deterrence had worked, he looked around with his bell-like eyes, looking for a target to further establish his power. How melodramatic. This guy is collecting protection fees, right? Thea didn't want to get involved in this kind of trivial matter, so she secretly cast a spell. This spell was modified from the Dream Invasion spell and could reduce one's presence to a certain extent. As long as it wasn't a blood feud, it could be ignored. She had learned this spell for a while, but she had not had the chance to use it. She couldn't use it during the election. If a living person stood in front of everyone, it would be useless no matter how hard she tried to reduce her presence. Thea drew 2 inscriptions in the air with her finger and silently recited the spell. She felt that a small part of her magic power disappeared. Thea knew that the spell was successfully cast. Now she could see the effect. You come here. The burly man with a full beard did not pay attention to Thea. He grabbed a boy dressed as a waiter next to him. With a grim smile he said to the boy, "Which family did I say I was from? Repeat it." The boy was scared silly. Who would remember which family you are from? He tried hard to recall, but fear filled his brain. He trembled all over and just couldn't remember. His reaction was in line with the bearded man's plan. He was going to make an example of him and deepen the impression of these people. He raised his wrist and pointed the gun at the waiter's head. Can't remember? Huh. Looking at the bearded man with a full mouth of yellow teeth, Thea was a little disgusted. These guys were the newcomers of the Botner family. They were too unruly and barbaric. She had a pistol in her handbag. With her speed, killing these 3 guys would be a piece of cake. However, there were so many people on the scene. If she rashly shot, the follow-up would be very troublesome. It might even affect Moira's election to a certain extent. Seeing that the waiter was about to die on the spot, what should she do? She hated it in her heart. The heroes of Star City were really not good at learning from the advanced experience of other cities. Why didn't any masked hero stand out? Chapter 135. Be careful and don't come out, Laurel whispered to Thea while she was secretly hating the fact that Star City didn't have a hero. After that, he didn't care about his weak strength anymore. He stood up fearlessly and shouted, "Stop!" For a moment, Laurel became the focus of everyone. Thea almost fainted. Sure enough, she wasn't a pure hero of justice. The valiant and high-spirited person next to her was. Thea looked at Laurel with disappointment. Could the self-defense fighting skills taught by your father be enough to deal with these 3 gangsters? Why didn't you think carefully before jumping out? This was too brainless. No wonder the villains were so good at scheming against the heroes. They were all led into a ditch by the righteous heroines. She certainly couldn't watch Laurel get beaten into a sieve. She was a friend. If she didn't have the ability, she could only take the blame for her. She didn't expect that today she would enjoy the treatment of a male protagonist. She cursed in her heart and grasped the fork in her hand, ready to take the initiative and kill the bearded man. When the bearded man saw that it was Laurel, the blonde beauty, he turned around and showed a wretched smile to his 2 subordinates. He took away the pistol aimed at the waiter and pointed it at Laurel. "Beauty, are you talking to me? Can you shout a little louder?" After saying that, he straightened his back a few times and laughed loudly in the midst of his subordinates jeering. This scum. Thea shifted her gaze from his eyes to his mouth. She would use this fork to teach him how to speak. Laurel wasn't the future Black Canary. At this time, she had just graduated from university and started working. It could be said that she was a very immature newcomer. Facing a gangster with a gun, her legs unconsciously trembled. But she still held on and looked at the bearded man without showing any weakness. The bearded man was a little dissatisfied when he didn't panic like he had imagined. He was ruthless in his heart and was ready to fire at Laurel. Now was the time. Thea was ready to strike, but just as the fork was about to leave her hand, her powerful spiritual power sensed the abnormality, and she couldn't help but withdraw it. A dark black arrow pierced into the bearded man's shoulder. The shot that was originally aimed at Laurel was unexpectedly off target. Who was it? Nowadays, other than her, there were other people who used bows and arrows. Sia hurriedly looked in the direction where the arrow had come from. She almost bit her tongue when she saw it. The newcomer was of medium build. He was dressed in black and wore a black hat that covered most of his face. He stood on the wall like a recluse, holding a black recurve bow that Thea was very familiar with. Why would he come to save Laurel? However, upon closer inspection, the man's attire was slightly different from Old Ma's. He wasn't wearing the traditional black combat suit of the League of Assassins. Instead, he seemed to be wearing a black leather suit that was specially made. The man in black seemed to be very nervous. After making eye contact with Thea, he hurriedly looked away and shouted to the 2 girls, "Run!" The bearded man was shot by an arrow. He panicked and ordered his subordinates to open fire. At this time, the subordinates also saw the man in black and fired a rain of bullets at him with their automatic rifles. Then, under Thea's horrified gaze, the man in black was hit by a stray bullet and fell from the corner of the wall. Oh, this guy definitely wasn't Old Ma. The distance was more than 100 meters. If he had a little bit of experience in dodging, he wouldn't have been hit. But whether or not he was one of them, Thea couldn't just watch him be killed. She swung her hand and hit the bar's light with the fork. Using a gun would easily expose her identity. The smoke would cause a reaction, and the bullet traces would be easily exposed. The fork was fine. She wasn't afraid of leaving fingerprints on it. Then, Thea grabbed Laurel, who was slow to react, and ran out in the midst of the chaos. When passing the corner, she looked around and saw that there were no surveillance cameras. Under the cover of the night, She created a clone to rescue the man in black who was shot. The clone had the skills of the original body. Using the black fog to cover the original face, she grabbed the man in black and ran to the side under the gaze of a few scattered onlookers. When she came to a place where no one was around, she took off the hood of the man in black. Although she was somewhat mentally prepared, when she saw his face clearly, her doppelganger Sia still laughed out loud. "Isn't this my brother Tommy? This guy seems to have improved a little from old Ma's training. Looking at his appearance, is he determined to be the second generation of the Black Arrow?" She rolled her eyes and guessed the truth. This guy has been secretly protecting Laurel for most of the day. In fact, he didn't want to come out. He just saw that Laurel was in a critical situation today and decided to help. What a love-struck man. Looking at his injury, Thea saw that the bullet hole was in his lower abdomen. There were no conditions for surgery nearby, so she could only carry him back to her secret base. Fortunately, Felicity wasn't here recently, so she didn't have to say much. The next step was the familiar process of disinfection and anesthesia, removing the bullet and stitching it up. Thea looked at her brother, a rookie hero who jumped out to save the damsel in distress. She didn't know what to say. If she wasn't here tonight, this rookie would have been killed by a few hooligans. Old Ma would go crazy if he knew the truth. He sighed as he put on the boy's jacket. After a few months of training, the boy had lost a lot of weight. Although he hadn't reached the level of training like Oliver, who used the salmon ladder every day, he still had a bit of manliness. "Who are you?" Tommy lost a lot of blood and his consciousness was a little blurry. He only saw a black shadow in front of him treating him. He immediately grabbed Thea's arm. Thea could be regarded as one of the top martial artists in the world. How could she be easily caught by him? But she was afraid of aggravating his wound, so she didn't struggle. To be honest, she scratched her head at his question. After thinking about it, she decided to continue to hide it. She was afraid that he would ask more questions, so she casually talked to him in Chinese. In the ears of Tommy, who didn't even graduate from primary school, it became %2&M hashtag and what the hell? He didn't give up and wanted to continue to find out more about Thea. Then the two of them talked nonsense for a long time. In the end, the conversation ended with Tommy completely losing consciousness. Thea wiped the non-existent sweat on her forehead. It wasn't easy to fool people. She picked up Tommy's bow and looked at it. It was the same bow as old Ma's, but the tension was weaker. He was her son after all. When she graduated, she didn't give him any souvenirs except for slapping her own face. She automatically ignored the fact that she had stabbed her own father in the waist. She also forgot about the necklace and whatnot. While Tommy was unconscious, she carefully felt his blood. Except for the blood relationship between them, she couldn't feel anything else. It didn't feel like her blood was boiling. It seemed that not everyone could awaken the blood. Thea didn't know whether she should feel lucky or sad. Since the blood of the Merlin family gave her a place in the future, she had the obligation to protect the safety of the father and son.